My husband's mistress arrived at our family dinner wearing my missing sapphire earrings. "Surprise, darling?" she smirked at Daniel, expecting me to break down in front of our children and parents. Instead, I calmly reached for my phone and pulled up the app. "The nanny cam caught everything," I said, turning the screen toward them. "Including where you found my jewelry." Their faces went pale as my family became witnesses. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I stood before the antique mirror in our master bedroom. A woman, transformed by betrayal yet somehow stronger for it. At 42, I still turned heads with my chestnut hair and green eyes that Daniel once said reminded him of Scottish Highlands. Tonight, those eyes were sharp with purpose as I adjusted the collar on my emerald silk blouse. The blouse was new, something I'd purchased during my lunch break yesterday after finalizing my plan. It complemented the black pencil skirt perfectly, creating an image of confidence and control, not the flowing floral dress Daniel had suggested I wear for our annual family dinner. "Wear something soft, Lana," he'd said. "Your mom always appreciates when you look more feminine." Daniel always preferred me looking accommodating rather than assertive. Our bedroom, with its carefully curated furniture and artwork collected over 15 years of marriage, suddenly felt like a museum of someone else's life. The king-sized bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets, the his and hers walk-in closets, the photographs from vacations in Bali, Morocco, and the Swiss Alps, all of it seemed to belong to a different woman. A woman who hadn't discovered her husband's betrayal 3 months ago. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened simple pearl studs to my ears. Not from nervousness, but from a cold, focused anger that had been building for months. I studied them, in the mirror, reminding myself that tonight required absolute control. Control had become my closest companion lately. The sapphire earrings that should have been on my ears were missing from my jewelry box. The earrings Daniel had given me on our 10th anniversary, claiming they matched my intelligence and depth. I'd noticed their absence 2 weeks ago, but said nothing, suspecting where, or rather with whom, they might be. From downstairs, I could hear the activity beginning. My mother arranging flowers in the dining room, my father chatting with our son Evan about his baseball season. Our daughter Lillian would be setting the table with the good china, precisely as I'd taught her. Family dinner was sacred in our household, a tradition we maintained even as the children grew older and our schedules became more hectic. Daniel had been surprisingly insistent about hosting tonight's dinner at our home rather than going out, as we usually did for the spring gathering. "Family should be surrounded by family things," he'd said with unusual sentimentality. Now I understood why. He'd invited his executive assistant, Emilia, under the pretense of her being alone on the holiday and practically family after 3 years of working together. 3 years of late nights at the office. 3 years of business trips that required his assistant's presence. 3 years of me growing increasingly isolated within my own marriage. I remembered the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday in February, snow falling gently outside the windows of our suburban home. The children were at school, and I was working from my home office on a new marketing campaign for my consulting firm. The housekeeper had called in sick, so I'd decided to tidy up myself, starting with the laundry. That's when I found the receipt in Daniel's jacket pocket. A hotel room charged to his personal credit card, not the company card he used for business expenses. One night, premium suite, room service for 2, the date coincided with a night he'd claimed to be working late in the office. When I casually mentioned finding the receipt over dinner, Daniel's explanation came too quickly. Year-end planning session ran late. The company put us up rather than having everyone drive home exhausted. He'd reached for my hand across the table, squeezed it reassuringly. "You know how intense those meetings get." I'd nodded, smile fixed in place. even as doubt crept in. The next day, I called the accounting department at Daniel's firm, speaking to the clerk who processed expense reports. "I'm reviewing some statements," I explained, and wanted to double-check which hotel the company uses for late-night work. "Sessions." The clerk's confusion confirmed my suspicions. "We don't have a policy for that, Mrs. Harrington. If meetings run late, executives typically take a car service home." That evening, I installed a small camera in the decorative hollowed book on our bedroom shelf, a wedding gift from my literature professor father, who thought it amusingly appropriate for two voracious readers. The camera was disguised as a USB charger, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. I synced it to an app on my phone, creating a direct feed to my private cloud storage. I told myself it was for peace of mind, that I would watch the footage and find nothing but an empty bedroom, or Daniel sleeping alone. I told myself I was being paranoid, that 15 years of marriage couldn't be undone by a single suspicious receipt. For a week, the camera revealed nothing unusual. Daniel came home late, as was increasingly common, changed clothes, sometimes showered, and fell into bed. I almost convinced myself I'd been wrong. Then came the Saturday when I took the children to visit my sister Jenny in Hartford. Daniel had begged off, citing a mountain of work before the quarter's end. "I'll just be boring company staring at spreadsheets all weekend," he'd said, kissing me goodbye at the door. That night, after the children were asleep in Jenny's guest room, I opened the app on my phone. The bedroom wasn't empty. Daniel wasn't alone. And the woman with him wasn't a stranger. Amelia, his executive assistant. The woman he'd hired 3 years ago, on my recommendation, after meeting her at one of my firm's networking events. The woman who sent me thoughtful birthday cards and asked about the children's activities with seemingly genuine interest. The woman who was now in my bed, wearing my robe, drinking wine from my favorite crystal glasses. I watched for 11 excruciating minutes before closing the app. It was enough. More than enough. But instead of confronting Daniel immediately, I found myself retreating into a cold, analytical state. I needed more information. I needed a plan. Over the next 2 months, I gathered evidence methodically. Screenshots from the camera footage, text messages I recovered from our shared cloud account, emails Daniel had foolishly left logged in on our home computer, credit card statements showing gifts purchased, including a pair of sapphire earrings identical to the ones he'd given me years ago. The sapphires disappeared from my jewelry box 3 days after I watched him place a small box in his briefcase. That night, I added a second camera, this one hidden in the decorative vase on our dresser, with a perfect view of my jewelry box. The footage showed Daniel carefully selecting the earrings, holding them up to the light, then placing them in his pocket. The next day, his expense report showed lunch for 2 at Elliott's, the upscale bistro where he'd proposed to me 16 years earlier. Control. That became my mantra as I planned each move carefully. Not just for revenge, but for security. Mine. And our children's. As CMO of my marketing firm, I had resources and connections. I spoke with a divorce attorney, quietly documented our assets, and most importantly, strengthened my relationship with our children, preparing them subtly for the changes ahead. Tonight, everything would change. Tonight, at our family dinner, with our children, my parents, and Daniel's brother Tony present, Amelia would make her grand entrance as Daniel's valued colleague and family friend. Tonight, wearing my sapphire earrings, she would discover that the woman she'd been deceiving was neither blind nor broken. I took one final look in the mirror, squared my shoulders, and headed downstairs. Game time. The aroma of rosemary roasted chicken, Daniel's favorite, filled the house as I descended the stairs. Our home, a renovated colonial in Westbrook's most prestigious neighborhood, had been featured in Architectural Digest 2 years ago. The perfect blend of classic elegance and modern functionality, the magazine had called it, much like the image of our marriage. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Daniel had purchased the property 10 years ago, surprising me for our 5th anniversary. "You deserve a palace," he'd said. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now I recognized it as another gilded cage, beautiful but confining. In the dining room, my mother adjusted the centerpiece of white hydrangeas and blue thistle, a color scheme that, I noted with bitter amusement, would complement the sapphire earrings perfectly. At 68, Eleanor Thompson remained elegant and perceptive, her silver hair swept into a chignon. She glanced up as I entered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You look fierce, darling," she said, smoothing the tablecloth. "Special occasion beyond the usual spring gathering?" I kissed her cheek. Just felt like making an effort. 15 years of marriage had taught me to lie convincingly. My father emerged from the kitchen, wine glass in hand. Robert Thompson, former English professor and eternal romantic, had always been Daniel's biggest supporter. "There's my girl," he beamed. "Daniel's been telling me about his new development. Project. Sounds promising." Daniel was always selling something. Real estate developments, investment opportunities, his carefully crafted image as the devoted family man. Harrington Properties had grown from a small firm into one of the East Coast's premier luxury residential developers under his leadership. What most people didn't know was how close it had come to bankruptcy during the 2008 recession, when my marketing expertise and family connections had saved it. "Where is Daniel?" I asked, checking the time. The dinner was scheduled for 7. It was 6:40. "On a call in his office," my father replied. "Said it was urgent. Some investor from Dubai." Another lie. I'd checked his calendar that morning. There were no international calls scheduled. He was coordinating with Amelia, making sure their performance tonight was flawless. Lillian appeared from the kitchen, carrying a stack of cloth napkins. At 16, she was already showing signs of the woman she would become, thoughtful, detail-oriented, with Daniel's charm and my analytical mind. "Mom, these napkin rings don't match the centerpiece," she said, brow furrowed with teenage seriousness. I smiled, genuinely this time. "The silver ones are in the buffet drawer, and thank you for helping." As Lillian rearranged the table settings, 13-year-old Evan skateboarded past the dining room doorway. "No wheels in the house," I called automatically. Then, softening, "Can you help Grandpa bring up a bottle of the Bordeaux from the cellar? The 2015. Daniel's brother Tony arrived next, perpetually single and reliably late. He carried an expensive bottle of scotch and wore the slightly disheveled look of someone who prioritized experiences over appearances. "Sis," he greeted me with a one-armed hug. "Looking sharp? Danny boy still hiding in his office?" Tony was the only person who called Daniel by his childhood nickname, a small rebellion against his brother's carefully constructed facade of sophistication. The brothers were similar in appearance, tall, with the same strong jawline and penetrating blue eyes, but fundamentally different in character. Where Daniel calculated, Tony improvised. Where Daniel accumulated, Tony experienced. "Important call, apparently," I replied, accepting the scotch. "You're just in time to help me finish the sauce." In the kitchen, away from the others, Tony leaned against the counter and studied me. "Everything okay? You've got that look." "What look?" I stirred the mushroom sauce with unnecessary force, the one you get when you're plotting something. Like when you organized that surprise trip to Belize for Danny's 40th. I'd forgotten that trip, how proud I'd been of myself for managing to surprise Daniel, who prided himself on being 2 steps ahead of everyone. The irony wasn't lost on me now. "Just focused on dinner," I said. "It's been a busy week." Tony didn't press, but his eyes, so like his brother's yet so different in what they revealed, held concern. Tony had always seen me more clearly than Daniel ever had. The doorbell rang at precisely 7, right on time, unlike Daniel, who still hadn't emerged from his office. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and smoothed my skirt. "I'll get it," I called, moving toward the entrance hall. Through the frosted glass panels flanking our imposing front door, I could make out a feminine silhouette. The orchestration of this moment, Amelia arriving before Daniel could emerge from his office to greet her, was not by chance. I'd texted her earlier from Daniel's phone, which I'd temporarily unlocked while he showered. Dinner at 7. Come a few minutes early so I can see you before everyone sits down. I opened the door with a practiced smile. Amelia, welcome. She stood on our doorstep in a fitted black dress that probably cost more than most of her monthly salary. Her dark hair was styled in loose waves, her makeup flawless. And there, catching the light as she turned her head, were my sapphire earrings. Lana, thank you for including me. Her smile was genuine, which somehow made it worse. I hope I'm not too early. Daniel suggested I come right at 7. I stepped aside to let her in. Perfect timing. Everyone's here except Callum. The lie slipped out easily. My fictitious cousin Callum would provide a convenient explanation for the extra place setting at the table, a detail I'd added this morning after confirming Daniel had invited Amelia. Your home is even more beautiful than Daniel described, she said, looking around the entrance hall with admiration. Her gaze lingered on the family photographs that lined the staircase wall. 15 years of holidays, vacations, and milestone moments. Thank you. Daniel's very proud of it. I led her toward the living room where my parents were now seated with Tony. You remember my parents from the company Christmas party? And this is Tony, Daniel's brother. As introductions were made, I noticed Tony's subtle double-take when he saw Amelia. Not from attraction, though she was certainly attractive, but from recognition. He'd seen the sapphire earrings before. He'd been with us in Antwerp when Daniel purchased them for me years. Daniel finally emerged from his office, perfectly timed to make it appear he hadn't known Amelia had arrived. But I caught the flicker of panic in his eyes when he saw she was already talking with my parents. The orchestrated moment of, "Oh, what a nice surprise, you're here early," had been stolen from him. Sorry about that, he said, kissing my cheek, as if everything was normal. The sheikh had questions about the penthouse finishes. I smiled, feeling the weight of my phone in my pocket. No problem, we're just about to sit down. Daniel moved to greet Amelia with a careful balance of familiarity and professional distance. Too careful. Too rehearsed. My mother watched the interaction with narrowed eyes, missing nothing. Shall we? I gestured toward the dining room, where the stage was set for the evening's real performance. The dining room glowed under the light of the crystal chandelier, another anniversary gift. From our 7th year together. Daniel had insisted on hanging it himself, spending an entire Saturday on a ladder while I held my breath below. See? He'd said when it was finally secure. I can build us solid foundations and bring in the light. The memory twisted in my chest as we took our seats. I'd arranged the seating with strategic precision, Daniel at the head of the table, myself at the opposite end. Amelia between my father and Tony, directly across from my mother. The children on either side of me, as far from Daniel's influence as possible. The table looks beautiful, Lana, Amelia said, apparently oblivious to the significance of her seat placement. Those blue flowers match my earrings perfectly. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but felt eternal. I watched as Tony's eyes flicked from Amelia's ears to my bare lobes and back again. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. They're lovely, I replied, my voice steady as I passed the bread basket. Sapphires have such depth, don't they? They catch the light in the most unexpected ways. Daniel's knuckles whitened around his wine glass. Lana's quite the jewelry expert, he said with forced lightness. She can spot quality from across a room. Speaking of quality, my father interjected, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents. Daniel was telling me about your new role in the company, Amelia. Something about client relations? Yes, she nodded, touching one of the sapphire earrings, unconsciously. I've been promoted to Director of Investor Relations. It's a significant step up from executive assistant. Congratulations, I said, serving Lillian a portion of roasted vegetables. When was this decided? I don't remember Daniel mentioning it. Daniel cleared his throat. It's recent. Just finalized this week, actually. Mom, Evan interrupted. Can I be excused to check my phone? Coach was supposed to text about tomorrow's lineup. After we've all served our plates, I replied, grateful for my son's predictable teenage priorities. Team news can wait 10 more minutes. As serving dishes made their way around the table, I observed Amelia closely. There was genuine warmth in her interactions with my children. She asked Lillian about her photography class with actual interest, remembered that Evan was hoping for the starting pitcher position. This wasn't the behavior of someone who viewed these children as obstacles. She genuinely liked them. It made what I was about to do both harder and more necessary. The conversation flowed with surface pleasantries through the first course. Business developments, neighborhood news, my mother's garden club drama. While I felt the weight of my phone in my pocket, the evidence accumulating in my private cloud storage. Not just of tonight, but of the weeks of footage that had preceded it. Amelia, those earrings really are stunning, my mother said during a lull, her eyes sharp with perception. I've always admired sapphires. They remind me of a pair Lana has, or had. I haven't seen her wear them in some time. Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. More wine, anyone? He asked, reaching for the bottle with uncharacteristic clumsiness. I'd love some, Tony said, holding out his glass and watching his brother with unveiled curiosity. And yes, those do look remarkably like Lana's earrings from Antwerp. Remember, that trip, Danny? You two, me and Anna before she decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Anna had been Tony's longest relationship, lasting nearly 2 years before ending abruptly. She'd claimed Tony lacked ambition. He'd countered that she confused ambition with materialism. The brothers rarely saw eye to eye, but they'd both agreed Anna's departure was for the best. All sapphires look similar in this light, Daniel said dismissively. Amelia's were a gift from her parents for her 30th birthday. Right, Em? Amelia hesitated, just a heartbeat too long. Yes, that's right. Family heirloom, actually. Lillian, ever observant, frowned slightly. But Mom, didn't you say your sapphire earrings went missing last week when you were looking for them to wear to the charity gala? I met my daughter's eyes, seeing in them a perception beyond her years. That's right, I did. How good of you to remember. Daniel's face had gone pale, but he rallied. You probably misplaced them, honey. You've been so busy with the Phillips campaign. Remember how you lost your emerald bracelet last year only to find it in your gym bag? The difference, I said calmly, is that I don't own a gym bag. That was Amelia you were thinking of. She mentioned losing a bracelet at the gym during the Christmas party. Quite a detailed memory you have of Amelia's personal items. The tension around the table was palpable now. My father, finally sensing something was amiss, looked between Daniel and me with growing concern. My mother watched Amelia with the focused intensity of a hawk tracking a field mouse. Amelia shifted uncomfortably, one hand moving unconsciously toward her ear before dropping back to her lap. I should clarify that these were a gift, but not from my parents. They were from... She hesitated again. From Daniel, I finished for her. Purchased last month at Carlton Jewelers downtown, the same jeweler who sized my original pair 5 years ago. Daniel's expression hardened. Lana, this isn't the time or place for whatever you're implying. On the contrary, I replied, family dinner seems the perfect setting to discuss missing family heirlooms, especially when they reappear on the ears of your executive assistant. Evan, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly looked up from his plate. Dad, did you steal Mom's earrings? The directness of a 13-year-old boy cut through the adult tension like a knife. Daniel flinched as if physically struck. Of course. Not, buddy. Your mom is confused. Those aren't her earrings. Actually, I said, reaching for my phone, I have proof they are, and proof of how they left our bedroom. Daniel's expression shifted from defensive to alarmed. What are you talking about? The nanny cam, I said simply. The one I installed after finding the hotel receipt in your jacket pocket 3 months ago. Nanny cam, Amelia echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand moved to the earring. Again, this time unfastening it with trembling fingers. Daniel, what is she talking about? I have no idea, he said, but the slight tremor in his voice betrayed him. Lana, the children are present. Whatever game you're playing needs to stop. It's not a game, I replied, pulling up the app on my phone. And the children deserve the truth as much as I do. Tony let out a low whistle. Danny boy, tell me you didn't. My mother stood abruptly. Children, perhaps you should... Stay, I interrupted gently. Lillian, Evan, I'm sorry this is happening. During dinner. But your father has made choices that affect this family, and I won't pretend otherwise to spare his dignity. I turned the phone screen toward Daniel, angling it so only he could see the thumbnail image frozen on display. Himself at my jewelry box, earrings in hand, his face drained of all remaining color. Lana, please, he whispered. We can discuss this privately. Like you discussed your promotion with Amelia privately? I asked, my voice steady despite the thundering of my heart. Or perhaps like you discussed our marriage with her in our bedroom while I was visiting my sister with our children. Amelia's eyes widened in horror, the removed earring clutched in her palm. Your bedroom? Daniel told me you were separated, living in different rooms. He said you were working through the divorce details quietly for the children's sake. And there it was, the moment where the last piece fell into place. Not just an affair, but a calculated replacement. A complete rewriting of our family story, with Amelia cast in my role. The dining room fell into stunned silence. My father's face had darkened to a dangerous shade of crimson. Tony was staring at his brother with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. My mother had moved to stand behind Lillian, her hands protectively on my daughter's shoulders. But it was the children's reactions that truly broke my heart. Evan's eyes had filled with tears he was desperately trying to blink away, his jaw set, in that stubborn expression he'd inherited from me. Lillian sat completely still, her face a pale mask of shock. Separated? I echoed, looking directly at Amelia. That's interesting, considering we went on a family vacation to Bermuda just last month. Daniel, did you tell Amelia about snorkeling with the children? Or the couple's massage we had while the kids were at the resort sailing lesson? Amelia placed the removed earring on the table with careful precision. You went to Bermuda together? As a family? Daniel's eyes darted between Amelia and me, a trapped animal looking for escape. It was for the children, he attempted. We agreed. To maintain appearances until... Until what? I interrupted. Until you'd successfully transferred all our assets into your private accounts? Until you'd convinced the children I was the one breaking up the family? Or until Amelia was firmly established in your company and your bed? Mom, Lillian whispered, her voice small. I immediately softened my tone. I'm sorry, sweetheart. You shouldn't have to hear this. No, she said, straightening her shoulders. I want to know. All of it. I remembered myself at 16. How desperately I'd wanted to be treated as an adult. To be trusted with truth rather than protected by comfortable lies. I nodded slightly, acknowledging her right to understand what was happening to her family. Daniel, my father finally spoke, his professor's voice cutting through the tension. Is this true? Have you been unfaithful to my daughter? Daniel's expression shifted, the cornered look giving way to something more calculated. He was regrouping, finding his footing. I recognized the transition. I'd seen it in countless business negotiations over the years. Bob, Eleanor, he addressed my parents with practiced sincerity. Lana and I have been having problems for some time. We've grown apart. These things happen in marriages. Growing apart is forgetting anniversaries, Tony interjected. Sleeping with your assistant in your wife's bed is something else entirely. Let him speak, I said quietly. I wanted everyone to hear the full extent of his justifications. Daniel continued, a hint of his usual confidence returning. Marriage is complicated. Lana's been increasingly focused on her career. She's been distant, unavailable. Unavailable, I repeated. Interesting word choice. Was I unavailable the night you claimed to be meeting investors in Boston when you were actually at the Westerly Hotel with Amelia? The night the parking garage security camera filmed your car entering at 7:15 p.m. and leaving at 6:30 a.m.? Amelia's head snapped up. That was a business trip. We had meetings with the Donovan Group. The Donovan Group canceled that meeting 3 days before, I replied. I know because I had lunch with Margaret Donovan the following week, and she apologized for the last-minute schedule change. Daniel's facade cracked momentarily. You checked up on my meetings? Not initially, I admitted. But after finding the hotel receipt, yes, I became quite thorough. I turned back to Amelia, feeling a strange mixture of anger and pity. When did it start? The affair, not the promotion. Those are separate betrayals. Amelia looked down at her half-eaten dinner. Last summer, she said quietly. The Reynolds Point development project. We were working late nights. Daniel said you didn't understand the pressures he was under, that you were too busy with your own career to support his. I nodded, pieces falling into place. The Reynolds Point project. Of course. The one where my marketing strategy secured the pre-construction sales that made the project viable. The campaign Daniel presented to the board as his own initiative. Daniel flushed. That's not fair. I acknowledged your contribution in the quarterly report. In a footnote, I corrected. After I insisted. My mother, who had remained silent through this exchange, suddenly spoke. Daniel, I think you should leave. Eleanor, he began, switching to his charming son-in-law persona. This is between Lana and me. Family disagreements happen. This isn't a disagreement, she replied coldly. This is a betrayal. Of my daughter, of these children, and of this family that has supported you for 15 years. I won't ask again. Evan pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I'm going to my room, he announced, voice cracking. Wait, I said gently. There's something else you should know. All of you, I added, looking around the table. This dinner wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about understanding the full extent of what's been happening. I pulled up another file on my phone, this one a document rather than a video. 3 weeks ago, I discovered Daniel had created a shell company called Harrington Holdings. He's been systematically transferring assets, including the deed to this house, into this company's name. A company where I have no legal standing. Tony swore under his breath. My father's expression darkened further. That's a standard asset protection strategy, Daniel countered quickly. Any financial advisor would recommend it. Perhaps, I agreed. Except for 2 problems. First, you did it without my knowledge despite my name being on those assets. Second, you listed Amelia as a signing officer on the company, not me. Even Amelia looked shocked at this revelation. Daniel, you didn't tell me that. There's more, I continued. The Cayman Islands account. The one you opened last year during your golf weekend with clients. The one that now contains nearly $2 million transferred from our joint investment portfolio. The systematic dismantling of our shared financial life had been the most chilling discovery of my investigation. Not just a betrayal of the heart, but a calculated effort to leave me with as little as possible when the inevitable separation occurred. How did you find out about that? Daniel demanded, abandoning all pretense of innocence. I'm the chief marketing officer of a major firm. Daniel. I have resources. After finding the hotel receipt, I hired Anna Sullivan. Tony's head snapped up at the name. Anna? My Anna? The very same, I confirmed. She's a forensic accountant now, specializing in high-net-worth divorce cases. Quite successful, actually. She was happy to help when I explained the situation. The irony wasn't lost on me that Daniel's betrayal had led me back to Tony's ex-girlfriend, creating an alliance neither brother had anticipated. You had no right to investigate my finances, Daniel said, his voice rising. Our finances, I corrected. And as your wife and the co-signer on those accounts, I had every right. Just as I had every right to install security cameras in our bedroom after finding evidence of your infidelity. Lillian, who had been processing everything in silence, finally spoke. Dad, were you going to leave us? Were you planning to take the house? The raw pain in my daughter's voice cut through the room. For the first time, Daniel seemed genuinely ashamed rather than simply cornered. No, sweetheart, he said, reaching for her hand across the table. I would never leave you and Evan. Never. But you were going to replace Mom, she said, pulling her hand away. With her. She nodded toward Amelia, who flinched at the cold assessment in my daughter's eyes. It wasn't like that, Amelia protested weakly. Daniel said your mother was unhappy, that the marriage was over in all but name. Was that before or after you started sleeping in our bed? I asked, my calm finally slipping. Before or after you started wearing my jewelry? I think, my father said, rising from his chair with the deliberate dignity of his academic background, that this dinner is concluded. He looked at Daniel with undisguised contempt. I trusted you with my daughter, with my grandchildren's well-being. Daniel attempted to salvage what little remained of his dignity. Bob, I understand you're upset, but family matters are complicated. Don't. My father cut him off. Don't insult my intelligence with platitudes. Not after what we've just heard. My mother moved toward Evan, who stood frozen in the doorway, caught between the impulse to flee and the need to witness. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Come help me in the kitchen, darling. We'll pack up some of this food. It was a transparent attempt to remove him from the increasingly tense situation, but Evan shook his head. I want to stay with Mom. The simple declaration, his choice to align himself with me rather than his father, seemed to hit Daniel harder than any of my revelations. For the first time, he appeared genuinely distraught rather than merely calculating his next move. Son, he began, his voice softening, this is between your mother and me. Adult problems that we'll work through. Stop lying, Evan said, his adolescent voice cracking with emotion. You've been lying to all of us. Mom has videos. Videos that were obtained illegally, Daniel countered, switching tactics. Surveillance without consent is inadmissible in court. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. Are we in court already, Daniel? Is that where your mind goes first? Not to your children's heartbreak or your parents-in-law's disappointment, but to what's admissible in court. Amelia stood suddenly, both sapphire earrings now clutched in her palm. I should go. No, I said firmly. You've been an active participant in dismantling my marriage and family. You don't get to walk away from the consequences. Her eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt anyone. Daniel said your marriage was over, that you stayed together only for appearances. He said you were cold, distant, that you married him for his potential but lost interest once he became successful. Each word struck like a physical blow. Not because they were true, but because they revealed how thoroughly Daniel had rewritten our history, even to himself. And you believed that? I asked quietly. Despite seeing me at company events, despite meeting our children, despite knowing that we still shared a home, a bed, a life, what did you think would happen when the truth came out? She thought she would have your life, Lillian said with devastating clarity. Your husband, your home, maybe even us. She looked at Amelia with a teenager's unsparing judgment. Did you practice being our stepmom when you wore my mother's jewelry? Lillian, Daniel admonished. That's enough. No, it's not, my daughter replied. She turned to me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. How long have you known, Mom? How long have you been planning this? I met my daughter's gaze directly. She deserved honesty, not protective half-truths. I've suspected for 3 months. I've known definitively for 2. The cameras went up the day after I found the hotel receipt, but I didn't check the footage until the weekend you and Evan visited Aunt Jenny. And you didn't say anything, Lillian said. You just kept acting normal, making dinner, helping with homework, going to Dad's company events. I needed to understand the full situation, I explained. Not just the affair, but the financial, arrangements, the future plans. I needed to protect you and Evan. Tony, who had been watching the exchange with growing disgust, addressed his brother directly. You've really outdone yourself this time, Danny. What was the end game here? Divorce? Lana? Marry the assistant? Keep the kids on weekends and pretend you didn't destroy your family? Daniel's expression hardened. You have no right to judge me, Tony. Your longest relationship lasted what? 2 years? You have no idea what it's like to be with someone for 15 years, to feel them slipping away. Slipping away, I repeated. Is that what you told yourself? That I was distant, unavailable, cold? Rather than acknowledging you were having a midlife crisis with a woman half my age? Amelia is 31. Daniel corrected automatically. That's your defense? That she's 31 instead of 25? I shook my head in disbelief. The issue isn't her age, Daniel. It's your betrayal. The methodical way you undermined our marriage while setting up a financial escape route. I turned to Amelia, who stood awkwardly clutching her purse and the earrings. Did you know he was transferring assets to protect them from me? Did you help him plan that too? No, she whispered. I knew about Harrington Holdings, but he said it was for tax purposes. I had no idea he was moving your house, your investments. But you were happy to accept the title of signing officer, I noted. Happy to wear my jewelry, to fantasize about taking my place. My father, who had been watching this exchange with growing concern, stepped forward. Lana, what do you need? From us right now? What's your plan? The question centered me, reminding me that this dinner was only one step in a carefully orchestrated strategy. Everything is in motion, I said calmly. Anna has documented all the financial transfers. My attorney filed an emergency injunction yesterday to freeze the offshore accounts and prevent any further asset transfers. The locks will be changed tomorrow while Daniel is at work. Daniel stared at me in disbelief. You're locking me out of my own house? My house? I corrected. As of this morning, when the judge approved my petition based on evidence of financial fraud. The deed transfer you attempted was invalidated pending full investigation. I hadn't planned to reveal this part yet, but Daniel's continued arrogance made it necessary. I needed him to understand that I was not merely reacting emotionally, I was systematically dismantling the advantage he thought he had secured. You can't do that, he sputtered. I built Harrington Properties from nothing. The house, the accounts, they exist because of my work. Our work, I corrected again. My marketing strategies secured the investors for your first 3 developments. My family connections introduced you to the Westbrook partners who funded the Riverside project. My inheritance paid off our mortgage during the 2008 recession when your company nearly went bankrupt. This was news to Amelia, whose eyes widened at the revelation. The company was bankrupt? But the annual report says Harrington Properties has shown continuous growth since founding. Creative accounting, I explained, and an influx of $500,000 from my trust fund that saved the company but was recorded as private investment. Daniel's face flushed with anger. That money was a loan that I repaid. With interest, I acknowledged. But the company's survival wasn't due solely to your business acumen, as you've claimed repeatedly. Including, I assume, to Amelia. I turned back to my father, answering his original question. My plan is straightforward. The children and I will remain in this house. Daniel's personal items will be packed and delivered to whatever address he provides. The divorce paperwork was filed this morning, citing infidelity and financial misconduct. You've been busy, Tony remarked with a hint of admiration. I've been thorough, I corrected, something Daniel didn't expect from his distant, unavailable wife. Daniel pushed back from the table, his chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. His face had transformed from shocked to calculating to enraged in the span of minutes. You've orchestrated this entire evening, he said, voice low and dangerous. Invited Amelia here just to humiliate both of us in front of our children and your parents. Is that what you consider good parenting, Lana? Using our kids as pawns in your revenge game? It was a predictable deflection, but effective. I saw uncertainty flicker across my mother's face, doubt in my father's eyes. Even Tony, who had firmly taken my side, shifted uncomfortably. This was the first real challenge to my carefully constructed plan. Daniel's attempt to reframe my actions as vindictive rather than protective, to position himself as the victim, rather than the perpetrator. This isn't about revenge, I said calmly, though I felt my heart racing. It's about truth. Our children deserve to understand why their family is changing, why their father has been systematically preparing to leave, while pretending everything was normal. You could have told them privately, Daniel countered. Instead, you created this spectacle, invited my colleague to dinner under false pretenses. Your colleague? Lillian interrupted, her voice sharp with disbelief. Dad, she's wearing Mom's earrings. You brought your mistress to our family dinner. I didn't know she was wearing those earrings, Daniel insisted, though his eyes avoided mine. And Amelia isn't... Don't, Amelia said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been since the confrontation began. Don't lie anymore, Daniel. Not about us. She turned to face me directly. I knew they were your earrings. Daniel told me. You never wore them. That they were wasted on you. He said you'd forgotten he even gave them to you. The admission hung in the air. Simple but devastating. Daniel's shoulders sagged slightly, his defense crumbling under the weight of Amelia's unexpected honesty. Well, my mother said into the silence, at least someone at this table has decided to speak truthfully. Evan, who had remained near the doorway, stepped back into the dining room. Mom, you said you have videos. Can we see them? The question created another pivot point, showing the footage would be definitive, irrefutable, but also deeply inappropriate for my children to witness. No, sweetheart, I said gently. Those are private, but they confirm what we're discussing. She's making this up, Daniel attempted, though his voice lacked conviction. There are no videos. I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward him again, this time showing a different thumbnail. Daniel and Amelia entering our bedroom, his hand resting intimately on the small of her back. Would you like me to play it? I asked quietly. Right here, in front of everyone? Because I will if you continue to call me a liar. Daniel stared at the screen, the blood draining from his face as he realized I wasn't bluffing. He had underestimated me completely, a mistake I had counted on when forming my strategy. This is illegal, he said, but the fight had gone out of his voice. Recording without consent. One-party consent state, Tony interrupted. Lana was one of the parties living in the bedroom being recorded. Perfectly legal. He looked at me with newfound respect. You did your homework. I had excellent motivation, I replied. My father cleared his throat. Children, perhaps you should step out while the adults discuss next steps. No, Lillian said firmly. We're part of this family too. We deserve to know what's happening. She's right, I agreed. They're old enough to understand, and they'll be living with the consequences of these decisions. Daniel made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Lana, be reasonable. We can work this out without lawyers, without courts. For the children's sake, don't use us as your excuse, Evan said, his young voice cracking with emotion. You didn't care about us when you were sneaking around with her. He pointed at Amelia, who flinched as if struck. Of course I care about you, Daniel insisted. Everything I've done, the company, this house, it's all been for you and Lillian. Then why were you moving it all into an account Mom couldn't access? Lillian asked. The simple, devastating logic of a 16-year-old cut through his pretense. Daniel had no answer. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and revealing. Amelia placed the sapphire earrings carefully on the table. I should go, she said again. Without your earrings? I asked pointedly. They're not mine, she replied, finally meeting my eyes directly. They never were. I just wanted to believe they could be. It was the most honest thing she'd said all evening, and despite everything, I felt a flicker of pity. She had been manipulated too, though far less innocently than my children or me. Wait in the car, Daniel told her. I'll be out in a minute. You're leaving with her? Evan asked, his voice small again. Right now? After everything Mom just said? Daniel looked at his son, genuine conflict in his expression for the first time. I need to make sure Amelia gets home safely. Then I'll go to a hotel and we can talk tomorrow when everyone is calmer. Don't bother coming back tonight, I said. As I mentioned, the locks are being changed tomorrow. Take what you need now. You can't keep me from my children, Daniel said, a hint of his earlier anger returning. I'm not, I replied. The temporary custody arrangement my lawyer filed this morning gives you visitation every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. You're welcome to pick them up at those times. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Daniel's voice was bitter. Not everything, I admitted. I never thought you'd bring your mistress to family dinner wearing my jewelry. That was a creative touch. Tony snorted. Always had a flair for the dramatic, didn't you, Danny? Daniel ignored his brother, focusing instead on our children. Lillian, Evan, I know this is confusing and upsetting, but I'm still your father. I still love you. None of this changes that. Lillian regarded him coolly. Everything's changed, Dad. You just didn't tell us. I'll get some of your things, my mother offered, standing, her practical nature asserting itself amidst the emotional chaos. Toiletries, a change of clothes. I can pack for myself, Daniel said stiffly. I'll go with you, Tony said, rising. To help. The protective undertone was clear. He didn't trust his brother alone in the house anymore. As Daniel moved toward the stairs, Evan suddenly stepped forward. Why, Dad? Why did you do it? The simple question, asked with a child's directness, stopped Daniel in his tracks. He turned slowly, facing his son. It's complicated, buddy. Adult relationships sometimes. Don't, I interrupted. Don't give him platitudes. He deserves a real answer. Daniel looked at me, then back at our son. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed genuine remorse in his eyes. I made mistakes, Evan. Serious ones. I told myself stories to make those mistakes seem okay. That's not an excuse. It's the truth. And I'm sorry you and your sister are being hurt by my choices. It wasn't a complete answer, but it was more honest than I had expected. Evan nodded once, then moved to stand beside me, his shoulder pressing against mine in silent solidarity. 10 minutes to pack, I told Daniel. Tony will help you carry your things. As Daniel and Tony headed upstairs, Amelia still lingering awkwardly by the dining room doorway, my father approached and placed a hand on my shoulder. I've never been prouder of you, he said quietly. Not because you caught him, but because of how you're handling it, with dignity and strength. His words threatened to crack the composure I'd maintained all evening. I squeezed his hand briefly, not trusting myself to speak. My mother approached Amelia, who flinched slightly, perhaps expecting a verbal lashing. Instead, my mother simply held out her hand. "The other earring," she said firmly. "Both of them stay here." Amelia handed over the sapphires without protest. My mother placed them in my palm, closing my fingers around them. "Something borrowed doesn't become something owned," she said, loud enough for Amelia to hear. "Remember that, young woman." The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Daniel and Tony's return. Daniel carried a leather weekender bag, the same one we'd purchased in Italy during our 10th anniversary trip. The memory of that vacation, once precious, now felt tainted, like so much else. "I've got what I need for now," Daniel said, his voice subdued. The initial shock and anger had given way to a grim resignation. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours about retrieving the rest of my belongings." "Fine," I replied. "Marjorie Winters at Hamilton and Associates. She's expecting the call." Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. Marjorie Winters was one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in the state, known for her meticulous preparation and aggressive protection of her clients' interests. Her involvement signaled that I wasn't merely reacting emotionally. I was waging a carefully planned legal campaign. "You've been planning this for some time," he observed. "Since I confirmed you were sleeping with Amelia in our bed, yes. Since I discovered you were hiding assets and preparing to leave us financially vulnerable, absolutely." Evan moved closer to me, a silent declaration of allegiance that didn't go unnoticed by Daniel. His expression faltered, the reality of what he was losing finally seeming to register. "Kids, I know this is a shock, but—" "Don't," Lillian interrupted. "Just don't, Dad. Not tonight." Daniel looked at his daughter, the teenage girl who had once adored him without reservation. Something in her cold assessment seemed to wound him more deeply than any of my revelations. "I'll call tomorrow," he said quietly. "We should talk, just the three of us." "If they want to," I stipulated. "I won't force them to see you, but I won't prevent it either. That's their choice." My mother, ever practical, stepped forward. "It's nearly 9. These children have school tomorrow, and this has been traumatic enough. Daniel, Amelia, I think it's time you left." Amelia, who had remained frozen near the doorway, nodded slightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, though it wasn't clear to whom the apology was directed. As Daniel moved toward the front door, Evan suddenly bolted forward. For a moment, I thought he might embrace his father, a final reconciliatory gesture. Instead, he stopped a few feet away, his adolescent frame tense, with emotion. "Did you ever really love Mom?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Or was that a lie too?" The question hung in the air, raw and devastating in its simplicity. Daniel looked at his son, then at me, genuine conflict evident in his expression. "I did love your mother," he said finally. "Very much, for many years. But not anymore." Evan, pressed, demanding the absolute truth only a child can insist upon. Daniel hesitated, caught between honesty and the desire to minimize damage. "It's complicated, buddy. Feelings change over time. People grow apart." "That's not growing apart," Lillian said, coming to stand beside her brother. "That's betrayal. That's making choices, Dad. Choices to lie, to cheat, to steal." Daniel flinched at each accusation. "Lillian, please. I know you're angry. I'm not angry," she interrupted, her voice eerily controlled. "I'm disappointed. Mom taught us that integrity means doing the right thing even when no one is watching. But you needed hidden cameras to behave with integrity." The sophisticated moral assessment from my 16-year-old daughter caught everyone by surprise. I felt a swell of pride amid the heartbreak of the evening. Somehow, despite everything, We had raised children with strong moral compasses. Daniel had no response. He looked at Tony, who simply shook his head. Don't look at me for support, Danny. You created this situation, every bit of it. With nothing left to say, Daniel turned toward the door. Emilia followed, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. As they stepped onto the porch, I called after them. Daniel. He turned, perhaps hoping for some final reconciliatory gesture, some indication that this theatrical confrontation had been designed to shock him into remorse rather than end our marriage. I've forwarded copies of the camera footage to your company email, I said calmly, along with documentation of the financial transfers. The board of directors receives the same information tomorrow morning unless you voluntarily resign as CEO. His face drained of color. You wouldn't. I already have, I replied. The email is scheduled to send at 9 a.m. unless I cancel it. Your choice what happens next. That's my company, he said, voice rising with renewed anger. I built it from nothing. We built it, I corrected, and the board should know exactly what kind of man is leading it. One who embezzles funds, conducts affairs with subordinates, and attempts to defraud his wife of her rightful assets. You'd destroy everything just for revenge? Not revenge, I said. Consequences. There's a difference. As they descended the porch steps, I closed the door firmly, the soft click of the latch more final than any dramatic slam could have been. For several seconds, no one in the entryway spoke. The enormity of what had just transpired settled around us like dust after an explosion. Evan broke the silence first. Is Dad going to jail? The question pulled me sharply back to reality. To my role as a mother first, wounded wife second. No, sweetheart, I assured him. What he did was wrong, but it's not the kind of wrong that leads to jail. It's the kind that leads to divorce and financial settlements. And professional consequences, Tony added grimly. The board won't take kindly to a CEO who uses company resources to conduct affairs and hide assets. My father placed a gentle hand on Evan's shoulder. Your father made serious mistakes, but he's still your father. Nothing changes that. Everything's changed, Lillian said quietly, echoing her earlier statement to Daniel. I looked at my daughter, seeing in her eyes a maturity that had accelerated painfully in the span of a single evening. Yes, I acknowledged. Everything has changed, but not everything is lost. My mother, ever practical, began clearing dishes from the abandoned dinner table. These children need something to eat. No one finished dinner. The mundane concern was oddly comforting, a reminder that life continued, that basic needs remained, even amid emotional upheaval. Ice cream, Tony suggested. This feels like an ice cream situation. A ghost of a smile touched Evan's lips. With chocolate sauce? Obviously, Tony affirmed. Emotional crises require proper Sunday architecture. I'll drive to that place on Maple Street that stays open late. As Tony grabbed his keys, my mother paused in her clearing. Robert, go with him. Make sure he gets the good vanilla, not that cheap stuff. My father nodded, understanding her real intention. To give me a few moments alone with my children. As the two men departed, my mother tactfully retreated to the kitchen with an armful of dishes. Left alone with Lillian and Evan in the entryway, I suddenly found myself without a script. The carefully planned confrontation was over. Now came the harder part, helping my children navigate the aftermath. Mom? Evan's voice was small again. Were you going to tell us? If Dad hadn't brought her here tonight? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on exposing Daniel's betrayal that I hadn't fully considered what I would have done if tonight's dinner hadn't provided the perfect opportunity. Yes, I said after a moment, but privately and differently. I was gathering evidence to protect us legally before having that conversation. Why didn't you tell us as soon as you knew? Lillian asked. No accusation in her tone, just genuine curiosity. I considered my answer carefully. Because I needed to understand the full situation first. Not just the affair, but the financial deception. I needed to secure our future before confronting your father. Morning arrived with unforgiving brightness. I'd slept poorly, waking every hour to check my phone, partly from habit after months of surveillance, partly from the lingering anxiety that Daniel might attempt to access the house during the night. But the notifications showed only a flurry of text messages from Tony, updating me on Daniel's whereabouts. Dropped Danny at the Westbrook Suites. Emilia took separate Uber. He's drinking heavily in the hotel bar. We'll check back in morning. The final message had come at 1:43 a.m. He's still here. Bartender cutting him off. Heading home now. Call if you need anything. I hadn't expected Tony to keep such a close watch. We'd always been friendly, but never particularly close. Our relationship defined primarily through Daniel. His steadfast support now was unexpected but deeply appreciated. Downstairs, I found my mother already in the kitchen, coffee brewed, reading glasses perched on her nose as she scrolled through her tablet. She looked up as I entered. "The vultures are circling," she said, turning the screen toward me. A local business blog had already published a brief item. Trouble at Harrington Properties? CEO Daniel Harrington seen arguing with wife at downtown hotel. That was fast, I murmured, pouring coffee. Someone at the hotel must have tipped them off. Your father's making calls, she said. His friend at the Tribune owes him a favor. Better to control the narrative than let rumor run wild. I hadn't considered the public relations aspect of our private drama. Daniel was a prominent figure in local business circles. Our separation wouldn't remain private for long. What time is the locksmith coming? My mother asked, switching topics with practiced efficiency. 9:30, I replied, and the security company at 11 to change the alarm codes. Good. She nodded approvingly. And the children? Lillian's still asleep. Evan's been up since 6, playing that racing game in the den. I told them both they could stay home from school today. She reached across the counter to squeeze my hand. You're doing remarkably well, Lana. Better than I would have at your age. I had a good example, I said, returning the pressure. I watched you rebuild after Dad's department had tried to take credit for your research. You taught me that righteous anger can be channeled productively. My mother had been one of the few female physics researchers at her university in the 1970s. The academic betrayal she'd experienced had shaped her approach to professional conflicts, meticulous documentation, strategic confrontation, and unapologetic reclamation of her work. I'd internalized those lessons without realizing how directly they would apply to my own life. Different circumstances, she said. But the principle remains. Never let anyone diminish your worth without consequence. The doorbell interrupted our conversation. Through the security panel, I saw Tony on the porch, carrying a bakery box and looking surprisingly alert for someone who'd been tracking his brother until the early morning hours. Reinforcements, I said, moving to let him in. With carbohydrates, apparently. Tony entered with forced cheer. Breakfast of champions, he announced, setting down the box of pastries. Or breakfast of people whose family dinners implode spectacularly. Either way, there are chocolate croissants. Any word from Daniel this morning? I asked, accepting the offered pastry. Tony's expression sobered. He called at 7, asking if I'd talk to you about reconsidering the board notification. Offered me shares in the company if I could convince you to be reasonable. I raised an eyebrow. Bribery? That's a new low. Not entirely new, Tony corrected. He tried to buy my silence during the Reynolds Point financial restructuring too, offered me a condo in the development if I wouldn't mention the accounting discrepancies to the investors. This was news to me. You never told me that. Tony shrugged, looking uncomfortable. Family loyalty. I refused the condo but kept quiet. Maybe if I'd spoken up then. This isn't your fault, I assured him. Daniel made his choices. Still, Tony persisted. I knew he was ethically flexible in business. I should have warned you. I'm not sure I would have believed you, I admitted. I was deeply invested in the image of our perfect marriage, the successful power couple building an empire together. My mother snorted. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage, only honest ones and dishonest ones. The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Lillian's arrival. She entered the kitchen in oversized pajamas, her hair pulled into a messy bun, looking younger than her 16 years. Uncle Tony, she said, genuine warmth breaking through her sleepy demeanor. You brought food. Essential disaster protocol, he confirmed, pushing the pastry box toward her. How are you holding up, kiddo? She considered the question while selecting a pain au chocolat. Processing, she said finally. I have questions. Lots of them. I imagine you do, I said gently. We can talk about anything you want. Later, she decided. I need to check on Evan first. He was up playing that racing game all night. I could hear it through the wall. The protective instinct my daughter displayed toward her younger brother was both heartwarming and heartbreaking, evidence of her maturity, but also of the burden this situation had placed on her. As Lillian took pastries upstairs for Evan, my phone chimed with an email notification. The preview showed Daniel's corporate address and a subject line. Urgent. Board meeting. I opened it cautiously. Lana, the board has called an emergency executive session for 10 a.m. I've agreed to a temporary leave of absence pending internal review. The evidence doesn't need to go to them now. We should discuss next steps for the children's sake. This public humiliation serves no one's interests. Daniel Tony read over my shoulder, letting out a low whistle. He caved fast. He's trying to salvage what he can, my mother observed. Professional reputation first, family considerations second. Another email notification appeared, this one from Marjorie Winters. Daniel's attorney contacted me this morning. They're proposing mediation rather than litigation. I recommend we proceed with the court filing regardless while entertaining discussion. Call my office when convenient. The rapid sequence of professional retreats confirmed what I had suspected. Daniel's confidence had been built on the assumption that I would never discover his deceptions, or if I did, that I would never fight back effectively. The doorbell rang again. The security panel showed a middle-aged man in a work uniform, the locksmith, 30 minutes early. I'll handle this, my mother said, moving toward the door with purpose. You should call your attorney. As she left, Tony leaned against the counter, studying me with newfound respect. You know, I always thought Danny was the strategic one in your marriage, the visionary. That's what he wanted everyone to think, I replied, scrolling through additional messages that had accumulated overnight. It was convenient for both of us in different ways. How so? I considered the question, articulating something I hadn't, fully acknowledged even to myself. Daniel got the public recognition, the business accolades. I got to work without the pressure of being the face of the company, without the scrutiny and criticism that comes with visible female leadership. But you were always the one securing the financing, structuring the deals, Tony pointed out. Yes, I agreed, and receiving a fraction of the credit, a dynamic I accepted for far too long. My phone rang. Anna Sullivan, Tony's ex-girlfriend and my newly retained forensic accountant. I hesitated, glancing at Tony. You should take it, he said, correctly interpreting my concern. Anna and I are ancient history, and she's exactly who you need right now. I accepted the call, putting it on speaker in a gesture of transparency. Anna, good morning. You're on speaker with Tony and me. Good morning to you both, Anna replied, her voice professionally crisp. Interesting development. Daniel tried to access the Cayman account at 6:15 this morning. Tony's eyebrows shot up. He what? Attempted to transfer the full balance to a new account. The freeze we implemented yesterday prevented the transaction. He's panicking, I observed, trying to salvage what he can. Exactly, Anna confirmed, and making crucial mistakes in the process. That attempted transfer is documented now, evidence of his intention to move assets despite the court order. His attorney will have a difficult time explaining that away. What's our next move? I asked. Stay the course, Anna advised. The financial documentation is solid. The emergency injunction is holding. Daniel has limited options, and he knows it. As Anna detailed additional findings from her overnight analysis, I watched Tony's expression shift from surprise to admiration. Whatever history they shared, he clearly respected her professional capabilities. One more thing, Anna added as we concluded the call. The board notification. Did you send it? No, I replied. Daniel agreed to a leave of absence. I've temporarily held off. Good leverage, she approved. Keep that in reserve. It's valuable negotiating currency. After ending the call, Tony regarded me thoughtfully. Anna hasn't changed, still terrifyingly competent. That's why I hired her, I said simply. And that's why Danny's in free fall, Tony replied. He never expected this level of coordination. He thought he was playing chess against a casual opponent, not a grandmaster. His assessment was flattering but not entirely accurate. I'm not a grandmaster, Tony. I'm just a woman who finally stopped pretending not to see what was right in front of me. The locksmith finished his work by 10:15, presenting me with a set of new keys and a reassuring nod. All done, Mrs. Harrington. Every exterior lock has been changed, including the garage and back entrance. I thanked him and accepted the invoice, noticing he'd discreetly waived the emergency service fee, a small kindness from a stranger who had likely pieced together our situation from the tension in the house and my mother's terse explanation. As he departed, my phone rang again. This time it was Marjorie Winters. I stepped into Daniel's home office, a space I now viewed with new eyes, noting the deliberately intimidating decor of dark mahogany and leather that had always made me feel like a visitor rather than an equal. Partner. Lana, Marjorie began without preamble. Daniel's attorney is proposing a settlement meeting this afternoon. They're suddenly very eager to resolve matters quickly. I imagine they are, I replied, running my fingers along the edge of the desk where I'd found the hotel receipt 3 months ago. The board meeting must have gone poorly. Indeed, I've received a call from Patricia Donovan. I paused, surprised. Patricia Donovan was the chair of the board at Harrington Properties, a shrewd investor who had backed Daniel's projects from the beginning, largely due to my marketing presentations that had convinced her of their viability. What did she want? 2. Verify whether you were involved in the alleged financial improprieties, Marjorie explained. I assured her that you were not only uninvolved, but were the one who discovered and documented them. And she'd like to meet with you, separately from Daniel and prior to any settlement discussions. I considered the implications. Patricia's interest suggested the board was already contemplating significant changes at Harrington Properties, changes that might extend beyond Daniel's temporary leave of absence. Set it up, I decided. But after we meet with Daniel's attorney, I want to hear their initial offer first. Good strategy, Marjorie approved. Settlement meeting is set for 2 o'clock at our offices. Patricia can meet you at 4. As I ended the call, I heard the front door open, followed by my father's voice greeting my mother. I emerged from the office to find him embracing her in the foyer, his expression grave but determined. Michael at the Tribune agreed to hold any story until we have a chance to provide an official statement, he informed me. But we need to move. Quickly. The business community is already buzzing with rumors. The protective instinct in his voice brought an unexpected lump to my throat. For all his intellectual detachment, my father had always been fiercely defensive of his family. Daniel's attorney wants to meet this afternoon, I told him. They're pushing for a quick settlement. Of course they are, he scoffed. The longer this drags on, the more damage to his reputation and the company. What are your terms? Full financial disclosure, I replied immediately. Majority custody of the children, the house, and honest acknowledgement of my role in building Harrington Properties. My father nodded approvingly. No punitive demands? Nothing to make him suffer? His suffering isn't my goal, I said truthfully. Justice is, recognition is, security for the children is. Tony emerged from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. Danny got off easy if you ask me. Maybe, I acknowledged. But vindictiveness would only prolonging our connection. I want this resolved cleanly, not dragged out in a bitter battle. The sound of the doorbell interrupted our conversation. The security panel showed a sleek town car idling in the driveway and a well-dressed woman on the porch, Emilia looking considerably more subdued than she had at dinner the night before. You have got to be kidding me, Tony muttered. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'll handle this. Are you sure? My mother asked, concern etching her features. You don't owe her a conversation. I know, I said, but I'm curious what brings her here. I opened the door to find Amelia clutching a small gift bag, her usual confidence replaced by obvious apprehension. Lana, she began, then faltered. I'm sorry to come unannounced. I need to return something else of yours. I regarded her silently, offering neither welcome nor rejection. After an uncomfortable moment, she held out the gift bag. The sapphire. Pendant, she explained. Daniel gave it to me for my birthday in January. I didn't realize it was yours until I saw the matching earrings in your jewelry box that night. When we... She trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. I accepted the bag without opening it. Thank you for returning it. Is that all? Amelia shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to apologize. Not that it changes anything, but I truly believed you and Daniel were separated. He said you stayed together for appearances, for the children, for the company image. And you believed that despite seeing us together at company events? Despite meeting our children and seeing no evidence of this supposed separation? She looked down. I wanted to believe it. Daniel can be very convincing. Yes, I agreed. That's his particular talent, making people believe what benefits him. Behind me, I sensed my family listening, their silence a protective force at my back. There's something else you should know, Amelia said, her voice dropping. Daniel's been systematically changing company records to diminish your contributions. Presentation files, meeting minutes, project documentation, he's been removing your name or relegating it to footnotes for over a year. This revelation, though shocking, merely confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Why are you telling me this? Because it's wrong, she said simply. And because I helped him do it. I thought I was supporting my mentor, showing loyalty to the man who was advancing my career. I didn't understand I was erasing another woman's work. The admission hung between us, complicated and uncomfortable. I couldn't absolve her of complicity, yet I recognized the familiar pattern of a young woman manipulated by a powerful man she trusted. The board suspended him this morning, Amelia continued, pending investigation. I've been placed on administrative leave as well. I'm aware, I replied neutrally. They're reviewing all executive decisions from the past 18 months. The Reynolds Point financing, the Westbrook acquisitions, the analytics platform implementation. She hesitated. The projects you spearheaded but weren't credited for. I studied her closely, trying to discern her motivation. Why do you care about my professional credit now, Amelia? You were happy enough to accept promotions based on my ideas before. A flush spread across her cheeks. I deserve that. But I'm trying to make some small amends. The board should know the truth about who really built Harrington Properties' success. From inside the house, Tony called out, "Are we really having this conversation on the front porch? Either invite her in or send her away, Lana. His interruption broke the tension. Amelia took a step back. I should go. The board meets again tomorrow morning at 9. I've provided them with the original presentation files showing your work, the ones Daniel had me replace with versions crediting him. I absorbed this information, reassessing Amelia's position in this unfolding drama. Not quite an ally, certainly. Not a friend, but no longer simply an adversary either. Why risk your career to provide that documentation? I asked. Because I've spent 3 years watching a talented woman's work be systematically appropriated and erased, she replied. And then I became part of that process. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to correct the record. Her response held an uncomfortable mirror to my own complicity in diminishing my contributions to preserve Daniel's ego and our marriage's facade of partnership. Thank you for the pendant, I said finally. And for your honesty with the board. Amelia nodded once, then turned to leave. As she reached the town car, she paused. Daniel's meeting with his attorney right now. He's going to offer you the house and full custody, but fight you on the company shares. He's desperate to maintain control. With that final piece of intelligence, offered. Without apparent agenda, she slipped into the waiting car and departed. I closed the door slowly, turning to find my family watching with varied expressions of surprise and skepticism. Well, my father said after a moment, that was unexpected. Do you believe her? My mother asked, always the pragmatist. I considered the question. About the document alterations? Yes. About her remorse? Partially. About Daniel's negotiating. Strategy? Absolutely. Tony shook his head. Classic Danny, willing to sacrifice family for power. Then he's miscalculated again, I said, a newfound certainty settling over me. Because the company is precisely what I intend to fight for. The sleek conference room at Hamilton and Associates exuded power and discretion. Precisely the image Marjorie Winters had cultivated for her high-profile divorce practice. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of downtown, while the polished mahogany table reflected the subtle lighting from recessed fixtures above. I sat beside Marjorie, Anna Sullivan on my other side with a meticulously organized portfolio of financial documentation. Across from us, Daniel and his attorney, Richard Porter, presented a study in controlled tension. Daniel's usual confident posture was diminished, his shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes avoiding mine. Let's begin, Marjorie suggested, her voice carrying the authoritative tone that had intimidated countless opposing counsels over her 30-year career. Mr. Porter, I believe your client has a proposal to present. Richard Porter, silver-haired, immaculately dressed, and notoriously aggressive in representing the city's elite, slid a document across the table. Mrs. Harrington can retain full ownership of the family residence and primary custody of the children, he began, his tone suggesting this was a generous concession, rather than the baseline any reasonable court would establish given the circumstances. Mr. Harrington will pay child support according to the statutory guidelines and provide college funds for both children. I glanced at the document without reaching for it, waiting for the other shoe to drop. In exchange, Porter continued, Mrs. Harrington will relinquish all claims to Harrington Properties, including any shares currently held jointly. She will also sign a confidentiality agreement regarding the circumstances of the separation. Marjorie's slight smile held no warmth. Is that all? Porter's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. My client is being exceptionally generous given the circumstances. The house alone is valued at $2.4 million. A house purchased with joint funds, including Mrs. Harrington's inheritance, Marjorie pointed out. And your proposal conveniently ignores the Cayman Islands accounts, the unauthorized asset transfers, and Mrs. Harrington's foundational role in building Harrington Properties. Daniel finally spoke, his voice lacking its usual resonance. Lana, be reasonable. You know the company is my life's work. Our life's work. I corrected quietly. Or have you forgotten who secured the financing for the first 3 developments? Who created the marketing strategy that attracted the Donovan Group? Who restructured the entire financial model during the recession? Porter interrupted smoothly. Mrs. Harrington was compensated as an employee of Harrington Properties for any consulting work performed, incorrectly categorized as an employee, to minimize her ownership interest, Anna countered, speaking for the first time. We have documentation of at least 14 major projects where Mrs. Harrington's work was fundamental to the company's success, yet deliberately miscategorized. In corporate records, she slid a much thicker portfolio across the table, including evidence of recent systematic alteration of company documents to remove Mrs. Harrington's name and contributions. Daniel's face darkened. Amelia, he muttered. She went to you. She went to the board, I clarified, with documentation of how you instructed her to alter records. Porter placed a restraining hand on Daniel's arm, then addressed me directly. Mrs. Harrington, surely you understand that prolonging this conflict benefits no one. Think of your children. It was a predictable appeal, weaponizing my maternal instinct to pressure me into accepting less than I deserved. I'd anticipated this tactic. I am thinking of my children, I replied evenly. I'm teaching them that their mother's contributions have value, that intellectual property can't be stolen without consequence, that financial fraud doesn't pay. Daniel's composure slipped further. This is ridiculous. You're trying to take everything we've built, I corrected again. And no, I'm not trying to take everything. I'm claiming my fair share, which is considerably more than 0. Marjorie intervened with practiced timing. Our counter-proposal is straightforward. Mrs. Harrington receives the family residence, primary custody with generous visitation rights for Mr. Harrington, and 45% ownership of Harrington Properties, reflecting her actual contribution to the company's development and success. 45%? Daniel echoed incredulously. That's highway robbery. Anna calmly opened her portfolio. Actually, based on Mrs. Harrington's financial contributions, intellectual property, and the penalty clauses in your prenuptial agreement regarding infidelity, we could legitimately claim up to 62%. We're being quite reasonable. Porter leaned over to whisper urgently in Daniel's ear. Whatever he said caused Daniel's expression to shift from outrage to something closer to panic. We need a moment, Porter announced. Of course, Marjorie agreed graciously. We'll step out. In the hallway outside the conference room, Marjorie's professional demeanor relaxed slightly. They're rattled. Porter didn't expect us to have the document alteration evidence. Amelia's testimony to the board was the piece we needed, Anna agreed. It establishes pattern and intent. I nodded, processing their legal assessment while wrestling with a growing sense of disorientation. Despite the strong position we'd established, a hollow feeling was expanding in my chest, a delayed emotional response to watching 15 years of marriage distilled into cold financial calculations and legal maneuvers. Lana, Marjorie touched my arm. Are you all right? Just processing, I assured her, echoing Lillian's words from that morning. It's strange seeing Daniel across a conference table instead of across our dinner table. Anna's expression softened slightly. The negotiation stage is often the most difficult emotionally. The relationship becomes quantified in ways that feel reductive. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened. Porter emerged alone, his expression carefully neutral. My client would like to speak with Mrs. Harrington privately. Marjorie immediately objected. Absolutely not. Any communication should go through counsel. Just 5 minutes, Porter pressed. Mrs. Harrington can terminate the conversation at any point. I considered the request. Despite everything, I was curious what Daniel might say without lawyers present. What appeal he might make after his initial approach had failed. It's fine, I decided. 5 minutes. Marjorie looked displeased but nodded reluctantly. We'll be right outside. The door stays open. I re-entered the conference room to find Daniel standing by the windows, his back to the door, shoulders tense. He turned as I entered, and I was struck by how haggard he appeared, as if he'd aged years in the 24 hours since our family dinner. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," he said quietly. I remained standing near the door. "What do you want, Daniel?" He gestured toward a chair. "Please sit, just for a moment." Against my better judgment, I complied, maintaining significant distance between us. Daniel returned to his seat across the table, then pushed aside the legal documents separating us. "Do you remember what you said to me the night we closed on the Reynolds Point property?" he asked unexpectedly. "We were on the balcony of that restaurant downtown drinking champagne." The question caught me off guard. I said many things that night. You said, "This isn't just a business, Daniel. This is our legacy. Something we're building together that will outlast us." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "You meant it then." The memories surfaced with uncomfortable clarity. The genuine pride I'd felt in our partnership, the belief that we were creating something meaningful together. "I did mean it," I acknowledged. "But that was before I discovered you were systematically erasing my contributions to that legacy. Before I found you in our bed with another woman. Before I learned you were hiding assets offshore." Daniel winced slightly at each point. "I know I've made terrible mistakes, Lana. Unforgivable ones. But destroying the company won't undo any of that." "I'm not trying to destroy the company," I corrected. "I'm claiming my rightful place in it. 45% ownership will effectively cripple my ability to lead," he argued. "The board already has me on thin ice. If they learn I've lost controlling interest to you in a divorce settlement." "Perhaps you should have considered that before you started transferring assets and altering company records," I suggested coolly. Daniel leaned forward, his expression shifting to one I recognized from countless business negotiations, the look he adopted when making his final desperate play. "What if we could find a compromise?" he proposed. "Something that acknowledges your contributions without undermining the company's stability?" I raised an eyebrow, waiting. 30% ownership, he offered. "A seat on the board. Public. Acknowledgement of your role in building Harrington Properties. And," he hesitated, "the Cayman funds. All of them." The offer was substantially better than his initial proposal, but still significantly less than what Marjorie and Anna believed we could secure through litigation. Why would I accept less than what I'm legally entitled to? Daniel's facade cracked, slightly, revealing genuine desperation beneath. "Because a protracted legal battle will drain resources from the company. Projects will stall. Investors will get nervous. The value of those shares you're fighting for will plummet before you ever receive them." His assessment wasn't entirely wrong. A public legal battle would damage Harrington Properties, potentially turning my victory into a Pyrrhic one. "And the children," he continued, pressing his advantage. "Do you really want them to witness months or years of their parents tearing each other apart in court? To have their friends see news coverage of our dirty laundry?" There it was again, the appeal to maternal protection, the suggestion that fighting for my rights would somehow harm our children. But this time, he'd miscalculated. "Interesting," I said, my voice hardening. "You didn't consider the children's well-being when you brought your mistress to family dinner wearing my jewelry. You didn't consider their future when you were transferring family assets into accounts I couldn't access." Daniel flinched. "That's not fair." "No, it wasn't fair," I agreed. "None of this is fair. But it's the reality you created, Daniel. And now you're asking me to accept less than I deserve to protect you from the consequences of your own actions." I stood, signaling the end of our private conversation. "The answer is no. 45% ownership, the house, primary custody, and full disclosure of all financial assets. Those are my terms." As I turned to leave, Daniel made one final attempt. "Lana, please. We built this together. Don't tear it down now." I paused at the door, looking back at the man I had loved for 15 years. The father of my children, my business partner, now my adversary. You're right, Daniel. We did build it together, and I won't let you forget that ever again. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows of Patricia Donovan's corner office at Donovan Investment Group. Unlike the deliberately intimidating atmosphere of Marjorie's conference room, Patricia's space projected understated confidence, contemporary, furniture in soft neutrals, artwork by local artists, and discreet awards displayed on floating shelves rather than dominating the walls. Patricia herself embodied this same philosophy, powerful without needing to announce it. At 62, her silver-white hair was cut in a precise bob that framed sharp features and intelligent eyes. As the largest investor in Harrington Properties and chair of the board, she could have ended Daniel's career with a single phone call. That she hadn't done so yet suggested she was deliberating more complex considerations. Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice, Patricia said, gesturing for me to take a seat at the round table in the corner of her office rather than across her desk. The choice was deliberate, a conversation between equals rather than a superior addressing a subordinate. I appreciate your willingness to hear my perspective, I replied, settling into the offered chair. Patricia studied me with the assessing gaze that had made her one of the most successful investors in the region. I've known you and Daniel for almost 13 years now. I remember when you first pitched the Riverside development. You handled the financial projections while Daniel charmed the room. The memory surfaced clearly. My meticulous preparation, Daniel's confident presentation, the seamless partnership we'd projected. That was a different time, I acknowledged. Indeed, Patricia agreed. What I find most troubling about the current situation isn't Daniel's personal indiscretions, though those are disappointing, but the systematic financial maneuvers and document alterations. Those speak to a fundamental character issue that concerns me as an investor. Her directness was refreshing after hours of carefully choreographed legal negotiations. The offshore accounts were what alerted me initially, I admitted. The affair was painful, but the financial deception suggested a pattern of behavior that extended beyond our marriage. Patricia nodded, unsurprised. The board received quite an education this morning from your husband's assistant. Emilia provided documentation showing at least 17 instances where your work was deliberately recategorized or your name removed from key projects. She was thorough, I observed neutrally. Impressively so, Patricia agreed, though one wonders why she waited until now to develop a conscience. I believe she was manipulated by Daniel, just as I was, though in different ways. Patricia's eyebrow rose slightly. Generous perspective given the circumstances. Not generous, I clarified. Practical. Understanding the dynamics at play helps me respond strategically rather than emotionally. A hint of approval flickered across Patricia's face. Which brings us to the matter at hand. The board has placed Daniel on indefinite administrative leave, pending full investigation. Our concern now is stabilizing leadership at Harrington Properties while this process unfolds. I waited, sensing she was building toward something specific. Your attorney has informed us that you're seeking 45% ownership of the company as part of your divorce settlement, Patricia continued. That would make you the largest individual shareholder by a significant margin. Correct. The board would like to understand your intentions regarding company management, should you secure this ownership position. The question was direct, but complex, fundamentally asking whether I plan to use my potential ownership stake to exact revenge on Daniel or to benefit the company. My intention is to create a governance structure that recognizes and values the contributions of all key personnel, I replied carefully. Daniel is a talented developer with genuine vision for property acquisition and design concepts, but the company's success has always depended on multiple skill sets: financial acumen, marketing strategy, relationship management, many of which I and others have provided without proper recognition. Patricia studied me thoughtfully. Your not seeking to remove Daniel entirely. It wasn't a question, but I answered it anyway. No. Despite everything, I recognize his value to the company we built together. But I will insist on a leadership model that prevents any individual, including Daniel or myself, from having unilateral authority over company decisions. A reformed governance structure, Patricia summarized, with appropriate checks and balances, precisely. And if Daniel refuses to work within such constraints, then he'll need to find another venture to lead, I replied simply. Harrington Properties will continue without him. Patricia leaned back slightly, her expression revealing nothing. That's a significant shift from the company's founding vision. The company's founding vision included a genuine partnership, I countered. That reality was gradually eroded as Daniel consolidated power and minimized others' contributions. I'm proposing we return to our roots, not abandon them. After a moment's consideration, Patricia nodded once. The board is meeting tomorrow, at 9 to discuss interim leadership while the investigation proceeds. I'd like you to present this governance vision directly to the full board. The request caught me by surprise. You want me to present to the board before the divorce settlement is finalized? Current circumstances make waiting impractical, Patricia explained. We have projects in development that require immediate oversight. Daniel's situation has created a leadership vacuum that needs addressing regardless of how ownership percentages are ultimately resolved. Understanding dawned. You're considering appointing me to an interim leadership role. Patricia's slight smile confirmed my assessment. Your qualifications are unquestionable. You know the company intimately. And frankly, many of us have suspected for years that you were the steady hand behind Harrington Properties' most successful initiatives. The opportunity was unexpected, but aligned perfectly with my longer-term goals. I'll prepare a presentation for tomorrow's meeting. Excellent. Patricia rose, signaling our discussion was concluding. One more thing, Lana. The board values stability and clear vision. If you demonstrate those qualities in this transition period, your negotiating position regarding ownership percentage may strengthen considerably. The implication was clear. Prove my leadership capabilities now, and the board would support my claims in the divorce settlement. It was a strategic alliance being offered at precisely the right moment. As I left Patricia's office, I felt the first genuine surge of confidence since discovering Daniel's betrayal 3 months earlier. The path forward was becoming clearer. Not just extracting myself from a broken marriage, but reclaiming my professional identity and rightful place in the company I'd helped build. My phone buzzed with a text message from Tony. Kids asking when you'll be home. Evan specifically requesting taco night. Morale-boosting comfort food apparently needed. The simple domestic request grounded me amid the high-stakes professional maneuvering. Despite everything, my children remained my center, my primary responsibility, and greatest joy. Heading home now, I replied. Taco night approved. Ask Mom to pull out the special salsa recipe. I had just reached my car when another message arrived, this one from an unexpected source. Sent you the original Reynolds Point financial models with your authorship metadata intact. Board should have them by now. Good luck tomorrow. Amelia, I paused, considering the complex evolution of Amelia from romantic rival to potential ally. Her motivations remained somewhat opaque. Genuine remorse, self-preservation, or perhaps a combination of both. But the practical result was additional ammunition for tomorrow's board presentation. As I drove home, I mentally outlined the governance structure I would propose. A model that distributed authority while maintaining operational efficiency. The presentation would need to balance assertiveness with diplomacy, acknowledge Daniel's contributions while establishing my own. For the first time in months, I felt something beyond anger or determination. A sense of possibility, an awareness that this crisis, painful as it was, had created an opening for something better to emerge. not just for me, but for the company itself. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the skeleton of my presentation had taken shape in my mind. I would need to refine it tonight after the children were asleep, prepare slides, anticipate questions from the board, but first, taco night. My children, who had witnessed their family's foundation crack beneath them, deserved my undivided attention and the comfort of normal routines. Tomorrow would be soon enough to reinvent my professional future. As I entered the house, the familiar sense of cumin and chili powder greeted me. In the kitchen, I found Evan carefully chopping tomatoes while Lillian mixed guacamole. My mother supervised, occasionally offering guidance, but mostly allowing them to manage the process themselves. "Mom's home," Evan announced, his earlier trauma temporarily shelved in favor of culinary focus. "I'm doing the pico de gallo, all by myself." "I can see that," I replied, dropping my briefcase and slipping off my heels. "It looks perfect." Lillian looked up from her avocados, her expression more measured than her brother's. "How did the meeting go?" The direct question reminded me yet again that my 16-year-old was processing this situation with remarkable maturity. She deserved a real answer, not a deflection. "Better than expected," I told her truthfully. "I'm presenting to the company board tomorrow morning. There may be some significant changes coming." She nodded, absorbing this information. "Good changes?" "I think so," I replied. "Changes that recognize the work I've done all these years." My mother caught my eye over the children's heads, her expression questioning. I gave her a slight nod. An abbreviated code we'd developed over years, communicating that yes, things had gone well, and no, I didn't need to discuss details immediately. "Where's Dad staying?" Evan asked suddenly, the question cutting through the domestic normalcy. "At a hotel downtown for now," I answered. "He'll find an apartment soon, I expect." "Is he still going to work at the company?" Lillian pressed, ever focused on practical realities. "That's complicated," I admitted. "It depends on several factors, including decisions the board will make in the coming days." "Because of what he did?" Evan asked. "Yes," I confirmed, seeing no benefit in sugarcoating the situation. Actions have consequences, even for adults, especially in business. My mother intervened gently. "Let's finish preparing dinner. You can discuss more of this later if needed." As the children returned to their culinary tasks, she moved closer to me, keeping her voice low. "Board presentation tomorrow? That's significant." "Very," I agreed. Quietly. "Patricia Donovan is positioning me for interim leadership while Daniel is on leave." My mother's eyes widened slightly, then crinkled with satisfaction. "About time." Tony appeared in the doorway, his arms laden with bags of tortilla chips. "Reinforcements have arrived," he announced. "Also, your father is setting up the portable screen in the den. He insists we need a family movie night after dinner." The small domestic details, my father's enduring belief in the restorative power of classic films, Tony's determined cheerfulness, my mother's practical support, created a sense of security I hadn't realized I desperately needed. Whatever professional battles awaited tomorrow, tonight I was surrounded by people who valued me without qualification or agenda. "Perfect," I said, rolling up my sleeves and washing my hands at the kitchen sink. "Now, who's in charge of the special sauce?" The Harrington Properties boardroom buzzed with tense energy as I entered precisely 5 minutes before the scheduled meeting. I had deliberately chosen a navy blue suit, professional without being severe, confident without being aggressive. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. "Dress for the position you intend to hold, not the one you've been assigned." Patricia Donovan nodded slightly as I took my seat near the head of the table, a placement she had arranged, I suspected, to signal my importance to the other board members. The remaining seats filled quickly with familiar faces, senior investors, corporate partners, and company executives who had worked alongside Daniel and me for years. At precisely 9 o'clock, Patricia called the meeting to order. Thank you, all, for adjusting your schedules on short notice. As you're aware, circumstances have necessitated this emergency session to address leadership concerns at Harrington Properties. Her deliberately vague phrasing acknowledged the elephant in the room without directly referencing Daniel's personal and professional misconduct. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their expressions ranging from concerned to curious. Before we proceed, Patricia continued, I should inform you that Daniel Harrington has submitted a written statement to be read into the record. This was unexpected. My grip tightened slightly on my portfolio as Patricia's assistant distributed copies of a single-page document. Mr. Harrington regrets he cannot attend in person, Patricia explained, though her tone suggested she found his absence convenient rather than unfortunate. His attorney advised against personal appearance while certain matters are under investigation. She began reading Daniel's statement aloud. To the Board of Directors of Harrington Properties, I acknowledge that recent events in my personal life have created complications for our company. While I maintain that many of the allegations regarding financial improprieties are exaggerated, I recognize that a thorough investigation is appropriate. In the interim, I voluntarily extend my administrative leave for a period of 90 days to allow operations to continue without disruption. I recommend the board appoint an interim CEO with the understanding that no permanent leadership changes will be implemented during this period. Patricia paused, letting the carefully worded non-apology hang in the air before continuing. I have dedicated 15 years to building Harrington Properties into an industry leader. I ask the board to consider this legacy when making decisions about the company's future. Respectfully, Daniel Harrington. The statement was quintessentially Daniel, superficially reasonable, while strategically positioning himself for eventual return. The 90-day timeline was calculated to outlast the immediate scandal while preventing permanent restructuring. Comments? Patricia asked the room. Richard Blackwell, our longest-serving board member and a conservative voice in company governance, spoke first. Daniel's personal issues aside, there are serious questions about financial management that must be addressed. The preliminary audit has identified concerning patterns, including systematic misattribution of work product, added Margaret Chen, another senior board member. The documentation provided by Ms. Martinez raises significant concerns about intellectual property and corporate records. Which brings us to the matter at hand, Patricia said smoothly, transitioning to the main agenda. Leadership during this investigation period and potentially beyond. Mrs. Harrington has been invited to present a governance vision for the company moving forward. All eyes turned to me. The moment I had prepared for had arrived, not just a presentation on corporate structure, but a fundamental reclaiming of my professional identity and contribution. I stood, moving to the front of the room with measured confidence. Thank you, Patricia. Before I outline the proposed governance model, I believe context is important. The digital presentation appeared on the large screen behind me. A carefully curated timeline of Harrington Properties development over 15 years, with key projects highlighted. Harrington Properties has succeeded through a combination of complementary strengths, I began. Property acquisition and design vision paired with financial structuring and marketing strategy. What has become increasingly clear, however, is that the attribution of these contributions has been systematically skewed over time. I advanced to the next slide, showing the Reynolds Point project documentation, the original version with my authorship metadata intact, side by side with the altered version crediting Daniel exclusively. This pattern repeats across multiple major initiatives, I continued, my voice steady. The Westbrook Acquisition Financial Model, the Riverside Marketing Strategy, the Analytics Platform Implementation. Projects where my work was fundamental, but deliberately recategorized or minimized in official records. The board members studied the evidence, their expressions hardening. Corporate governance concerns transcended personal sympathy. Document alteration and misattribution struck at the heart of company integrity. Mrs. Harrington, Richard Blackwell interjected. To be clear, are you alleging these alterations were made at Daniel's direction? I am, I confirmed. And Ms. Martinez has provided sworn testimony to that effect, including specific instances where she was instructed to modify documents to diminish or remove my contributions. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't merely a marital dispute spilling into the workplace. It was a pattern of professional misconduct that called into question the company's entire leadership structure. What do you propose? Patricia asked, though I suspected she already knew the answer. I advanced to the next slide, displaying a reformed organizational chart. A distributed leadership model that recognizes the diverse skills required for our success. 3 equal executive positions: Chief Development Officer overseeing property acquisition and design, Chief Financial Officer managing capital structure and investment relationships, and Chief Marketing Officer handling brand strategy and client acquisition. And who would fill these positions? Margaret Chen asked, though her knowing expression suggested she had anticipated this restructuring. Daniel's strengths have always been in development and design, I acknowledged, deliberately giving credit where it was due. In a reformed governance structure, that role would capitalize on his talents while implementing appropriate oversight for financial and operational decisions. And the other positions? Richard pressed. The CFO role would be filled by Anna Sullivan, whose forensic accounting work has already identified significant opportunities for improved financial governance, I replied. And I would serve as Chief Marketing Officer, formalizing the role I've effectively performed for years. Patricia nodded slightly, a signal that this aligned with discussions we'd had previously. Who would serve as CEO in this model? No single CEO, I proposed. Rather, an executive committee comprising all 3 C-suite positions, with major decisions requiring majority approval. The board would retain ultimate oversight, with quarterly governance reviews. Richard Blackwell frowned slightly. Committee leadership is often inefficient. Clear lines of authority are essential. Clear authority doesn't require centralized control, I countered. Our most successful projects have always emerged from collaborative leadership. We're simply formalizing that approach while implementing safeguards against the type of unilateral decision-making that created our current situation. For the next 30 minutes, I fielded questions from the board, addressing concerns about operational efficiency, client relationships, and transition management. The skepticism I'd anticipated gradually gave way to cautious support as the practical benefits of the model became apparent. This seems a sensible interim approach, Patricia concluded as the discussion wound down. The question remains whether Daniel will accept this restructuring, given his statement's emphasis on temporary arrangements. I met her gaze directly. Daniel's acceptance is obviously preferable but not essential. My divorce settlement will include a minimum 45% ownership stake in Harrington Properties. Combined with the board's fiduciary oversight, that provides sufficient authority to implement this governance model regardless of his personal preferences. Richard Blackwell raised an eyebrow. That's quite assertive, Mrs. Harrington. It's realistic, I corrected gently. Daniel created this situation through systematic deception, both personal and professional. The company's stability can't remain contingent on his willingness to acknowledge these realities. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Patricia allowed it to settle before speaking. I believe we have sufficient information to make an initial determination, she announced. I move that we formally appoint Lana Harrington as Interim Chief Marketing Officer and Executive Committee Chair, effective immediately, with full authority to implement the proposed governance structure pending final resolution of ownership. Percentages. Seconded, Margaret Chen said promptly. All in favor? Patricia asked. The response was unanimous, 12 hands raised without hesitation. Motion carried, Patricia declared. Congratulations, Lana. The board places its confidence in your leadership during this transition period. As the meeting concluded and board members offered individual congratulations, I maintained my professional composure. But beneath it, a profound sense of vindication unfurled, not merely for the professional recognition, but for the fundamental acknowledgement of my worth and contribution. My phone vibrated as I gathered my materials. A text message from Marjorie. Winters, Daniel's attorney called. They're accepting our terms. Full settlement meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Well done. The final piece had fallen into place. Daniel, confronted with the board's decision and the overwhelming evidence against him, had finally recognized his untenable position. The fight I had prepared for would not be necessary after all. As I left the boardroom, Patricia fell into step beside me. That presentation was masterful, she observed. I've suspected for years that you were the strategic force behind Harrington Properties' success. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, genuinely curious. Patricia's expression turned reflective. Professional courtesy, perhaps, or misplaced. Respect for what appeared to be your choice to remain in the background. She paused. I regret that now. We all make choices about which battles to fight, I replied. Until recently, I believed the partnership with Daniel, both personal and professional, was worth the compromises. And now? I considered the question carefully. Now I understand that unequal partnerships eventually collapse under their own imbalance. In business as in marriage, Patricia nodded thoughtfully. A lesson expensively learned, but valuable nonetheless. As we reached the elevator, she extended her hand. Welcome to your new role, Lana. I suspect Harrington Properties is about to enter its most successful chapter yet. I accepted her handshake, the gesture sealing not just a professional appointment, but a fundamental reclamation of identity. Thank you. Though I suspect the company name may need reconsideration in the near future. Patricia smiled slightly. Aurora Properties has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? The name, my grandmother's name, caught me by surprise. How did you know? Your grandmother was one of my earliest mentors, Patricia revealed. When Daniel first approached our investment firm 15 years ago, it was the Thompson connection that got him through the door. Aurora would be proud to see her granddaughter finally taking her rightful place. The unexpected connection completed a circle I hadn't realized existed. As the elevator doors closed, I felt the weight of the past 3 months, the shock, the anger, the calculated planning, begin to lift. The path forward was clear at last, illuminated not by vengeance but by the simple power of truth finally acknowledged. The house was quiet when I returned home, the temporary calm created by a school. Day in progress and my parents taking advantage of the respite to run errands. I had deliberately taken the day off, recognizing that the board meeting and impending settlement would require my full focus. I moved through the familiar rooms with a strange sense of detachment, noticing details I'd overlooked during the heightened emotion of the past few days. The family photographs along the staircase, charting our evolution from newlyweds to a family of 4. The small chip in the marble countertop from when Evan had dropped a cast-iron pan last Thanksgiving. The subtle indentation in Daniel's office chair from years of his particular posture. Physical remnants of a shared history that now existed in an uncomfortable liminal space, neither fully past nor meaningfully present. In the kitchen, I found a note from my mother. Grocery shopping with your father. Tony coming at 2 p.m. to help with children after school. Dinner and slow cooker. Rest while you can. Love, Mom. Her practical support had been unwavering throughout this ordeal. I made a mental note to find a meaningful way to thank both my parents, once the immediate crisis had passed. I poured a cup of coffee and carried it to the back patio, settling into an Adirondack chair overlooking the carefully landscaped garden. The space had been my project, a small but significant domain where I exercised complete creative control. Daniel had shown little interest in the garden beyond appreciating its appearance during outdoor entertaining. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Marjorie Winters. "The settlement paperwork is ready for your review," she said without preamble. "I've emailed the documents. Overall, it aligns with our terms. 45% ownership of Harrington Properties, the family residence, primary custody with generous visitation, and full financial disclosure including the offshore accounts." "Did they include the public acknowledgement of my contributions?" I asked, recalling one of the terms Daniel had most strongly resisted. "Yes," Marjorie confirmed. "The press release has been drafted for your approval. It specifically references your founding role and ongoing leadership position." I allowed myself a moment of validation. This aspect of the settlement wasn't about money or power. It was about recognition, about correcting a narrative that had diminished my professional identity for years. "What about the confidentiality provisions?" I asked, addressing another contentious point. "Limited to personal details only," Marjorie replied. "Your professional contributions and Daniel's financial maneuvers remain disclosable." He pushed hard on this, but ultimately conceded when we made it a non-negotiable condition. The settlement represented not just the dissolution of my marriage, but the restructuring of my professional identity, a comprehensive reset that would allow both Daniel and me to move forward with dignity, albeit separately. "It's a strong outcome, Lana," Marjorie concluded, "one of the most favorable settlements I've negotiated in my career." After ending the call, I sat with this assessment, trying to reconcile the professional victory with the personal loss. 15 years of marriage, reduced to legal clauses and financial calculations. 2 children whose lives would forever include the complexity of divided holidays and separate households. The death of a shared dream, however flawed its execution had been. Yet alongside the grief was an undeniable sense of liberation. Freedom from the constant diminishment, the subtle erasure of my contributions, the gradual compression of my identity into supporting roles both at home and at work. The sound of a car in the driveway pulled me from these reflections. Through the side gate, I glimpsed Tony's familiar figure carrying shopping bags. I met him at the kitchen door. "Reinforcements have arrived," he announced, holding up the bags. "Ice cream for after-school emotional support and..." He produced a bottle of expensive champagne. "Appropriate celebration libations for later. The board appointment calls for proper acknowledgement." "How did you know?" I asked, surprised by his awareness of the morning's outcomes. "Patricia Donovan called me," he explained, placing the items in the refrigerator. "Apparently, she's known my boss at the architecture firm for years. She was quite impressed with your presentation." I hadn't realized Tony maintained professional connections to the company's board members. "What did she say exactly?" "That you demonstrated exceptional leadership under difficult circumstances," he quoted. "And that Daniel was a fool to underestimate you all these years." The validation from Patricia, an industry leader I had long admired, carried particular weight. "She mentioned knowing my grandmother," I shared. "Called her a mentor." Tony's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Aurora Thompson was connected to Patricia Donovan? That's quite a revelation." "Apparently, it's why Daniel got his foot in the door 15 years ago," I said, the irony not lost on me. "My family connections opened the path he later claimed to have forged alone." "Classic Danny," Tony remarked, though without his usual sardonic edge, always carefully editing the narrative to center himself. We moved to the living room, the conversation shifting to practical matters, the children's responses to recent events, logistics for the coming weeks, the impending settlement meeting. Tony's steady presence offered a familial continuity, increasingly valued. "Have you thought about what you'll say to the kids?" he asked as we discussed the formal custody arrangements. "About the settlement, the company changes all of it?" I had been contemplating this very question throughout the morning. The truth, but age-appropriately filtered, I decided. Evan needs concrete reassurance about stability. where he'll live, when he'll see Daniel, how daily routines will continue. Lillian will want more detailed understanding of the professional aspects, the company restructuring, my new role. And about Amelia? Tony pressed gently. Her role in all this is complicated now. Indeed, Amelia had evolved from homewrecker to reluctant ally in this unfolding drama. Her testimony to the board proving crucial to establishing the pattern of professional misconduct that had strengthened my position. I'll explain that people are complex, I said after consideration. That Amelia made serious mistakes but also ultimately chose to tell the truth when it mattered. That accountability and redemption can coexist. Tony nodded approval. Nuanced but honest. They're lucky to have you guiding them through this. I hope so, I replied, the weight of responsibility momentarily overwhelming. I didn't choose this. Disruption for them. No, Tony agreed, but you're choosing how to navigate it, with integrity, strength, and remarkable grace under pressure. His assessment was generous but affirming. Whatever mistakes I might make in the difficult path ahead, I was committed to demonstrating values I hoped my children would internalize. Resilience, self-respect, and the courage to reclaim one's proper place in the world. The afternoon light shifted as we talked, shadows lengthening across the living room floor. Soon the children would return from school, and I would begin the delicate process of explaining their new reality. A mother with expanded professional authority, a father living separately but remaining present in their lives, a family reconfigured, but not diminished. What happens after tomorrow's settlement? Tony asked, voicing the question that had been lingering at the edges of my consciousness. With Daniel, I mean. Can you work together after everything that's happened? It was the most challenging aspect of the path forward, maintaining professional collaboration with the man who had betrayed me so comprehensively. The distributed leadership model I'd proposed to the board would require ongoing interaction, civil communication, mutual respect for distinct areas of expertise. We'll have to, I said simply. The alternative is dismantling the company we built together, which serves no one's interests, not ours, not the employees, not the investors. That's remarkably pragmatic, Tony observed. Not many people could separate personal betrayal from professional necessity so effectively. It's not separation, I corrected. It's compartmentalization. The betrayal remains real, but it doesn't negate Daniel's genuine talents in property development and design. The new governance structure simply ensures those talents operate within appropriate boundaries. Tony studied me with newfound appreciation. You know, for years I watched Danny underestimate you, even as I did the same in different ways. We both made the mistake of confusing your composure for passivity. A common error, I acknowledged without rancor. One Daniel made repeatedly, to his ultimate disadvantage. The sound of the school bus stopping at the corner signaled the imminent arrival of the children. Tony stood, straightening his shirt in preparation for assuming the role of supportive uncle. Ready? He asked, the simple question encompassing the complex challenge ahead. I rose to join him, smoothing the skirt of my navy suit, still dressed for the board meeting, for the leadership role I had finally claimed openly. Ready, I confirmed, moving toward the front door to greet my children, to begin explaining their new reality with honesty, reassurance, and cautious optimism. As Evan and Lillian approached up the walkway, their expressions brightened at the sight of their uncle waiting alongside me. Whatever doubts and questions they carried about their family's future, this moment offered tangible proof that some relationships remained steady, some foundations unshaken. The immediate aftermath of seismic change often reveals what truly matters, not the structures that have collapsed, but the connections that endure despite the shifting ground beneath them. 6 months later, the autumn light streamed through the wall of windows in my office at Aurora Properties, casting a warm glow across the conference table where quarterly reports awaited my review. The company's rebranding had been finalized 3 months earlier, a strategic decision that signaled both continuity and fundamental change to our clients and partners. The name, honoring my grandmother, whose initial investment had launched what was then Harrington Properties, had met with unanimous board approval. Even Daniel had recognized the practical and symbolic value of the change, though his acceptance had come with characteristic reluctance. My office door opened after a perfunctory knock, revealing Anna Sullivan with a tablet in hand. As Chief D. Financial Officer, she had systematically reorganized the company's financial governance, implementing transparency protocols that had already attracted positive attention from industry analysts. "The Westbrook numbers are in," she announced, taking a seat across from me. 17% above projections, with pre-sales exceeding targets by nearly 30%. I smiled, recalling the heated board discussions 6 months earlier, when I'd advocated for the Westbrook development's redesign. A decision Daniel had initially opposed but eventually supported after seeing the market research. "The sustainability features are driving significant premium," Anna continued, scrolling through data. "Exactly as your market analysis predicted." "Send the full report to Daniel," I instructed. "He should include these metrics in his presentation to the Donovan Group next week." Our professional relationship had evolved into something I hadn't initially thought possible. A genuine collaboration based on mutual respect for distinct areas of expertise. Daniel's talent for property development and architectural vision complemented my marketing strategy and financial acumen. The distributed leadership model had turned potential conflict into productive tension. "Already done," Anna confirmed. "He actually called this morning to discuss integrating similar features into the Riverside expansion." This voluntary consultation represented significant growth from the Daniel who had once systematically erased my contributions. Whether motivated by genuine personal evolution or simple pragmatic adaptation to new power dynamics, the change benefited everyone involved. "The quarterly board presentation is finalized," Anna added, changing topics. "Patricia asked if you'd review the executive summary before tomorrow's meeting." "Of course," I agreed, accepting the tablet she passed across the table. "How are things with Tony, by the way? He mentioned you were considering a weekend in Vermont." Anna's professional demeanor softened slightly. "The fall foliage trip? Yes, we've booked a cabin for Columbus Day weekend, assuming the Hayes project timeline holds." The rekindled relationship between Anna and Tony had developed gradually over the past months, an unexpected positive outcome of the upheaval that had restructured both my personal and professional lives. They approached their reconnection with the caution of people who recognized past mistakes and were determined to avoid repeating them. "The construction timeline is solid," I assured her. Tony's architecture team delivered the revised plans ahead of schedule. Our conversation shifted to operational matters, upcoming project milestones, marketing initiatives, investment opportunities. The rhythms of corporate leadership had become comfortably familiar, my authority no longer tentative or hidden behind Daniel's more visible presence. "Oh," Anna said as she prepared to leave, "Amelia sent over the charity gala materials for your approval. The Foundation's first public event is generating significant interest. The Aurora Foundation, focused on supporting women in commercial real estate through mentorship, education, and networking opportunities, had been my first initiative after the company rebranding. Amelia, in an unexpected career pivot, had requested to lead the Foundation's development. Her transition from executive assistant to foundation director represented her own journey of professional redefinition, one I had supported after considerable reflection. Her skills in organization and relationship management served the foundation well, while her personal experience with workplace power dynamics informed our mentorship programs. "I'll review them this afternoon," I promised, making a note in my calendar. After Anna departed, I allowed myself a moment of reflection, comparing my current professional reality with where I had been 6 months earlier. The contrast was stark. from systematically diminished partner to executive committee chair, from behind-the-scenes strategist to public leader, from unacknowledged contributor to recognized industry voice. The personal transformation had been equally profound. My phone chimed with a text message from Lillian. Finished early at photography club. Can I come to your office? Want to show you my portfolio for the NYU application. I smiled at my daughter's enthusiasm. At 17, she was already developing a sophisticated visual aesthetic, her photography gaining recognition beyond typical high school accomplishments. Her college applications focused on prestigious arts programs, a path Daniel and I both supported, though from different perspectives. Absolutely. I'll tell reception to expect you. Bring the portfolio and we can review it over late lunch. The easy communication with my children had been hard-won through months of careful navigation. The initial shock and anger they'd felt toward their father had gradually mellowed into a complex but functional relationship. Daniel's commitment to regular visitation and genuine involvement in their lives had helped stabilize the new family configuration. For Evan, now 14, adjustment had come through immersion in baseball and the structured routine we maintained between households. For Lillian, processing had involved deeper conversations about relationships, power dynamics, and professional identity, discussions that sometimes left me marveling at her emotional intelligence. A knock at my door announced the arrival of Margaret Chen, our newly appointed Director of International Development. The Singapore investors are confirmed for next Thursday, she reported. They're particularly interested in our sustainability initiatives. Excellent, I replied. Let's arrange for Daniel to join that meeting as well. His design vision for integrating environmental features will resonate with their priorities. Margaret nodded, making notes. Will you be leading the presentation? Or shall I prepare Daniel to take point? The question would have been unthinkable in the company's previous incarnation, where Daniel automatically claimed center stage regardless of subject matter. Now, leadership roles shifted according to expertise and strategic considerations. We'll co-present, I decided. Daniel on design concepts, you on regional adaptation, and I'll handle investment structure and returns projection. As Margaret departed, Patricia Donovan appeared in my doorway. As board chair, her continuing support had been instrumental in stabilizing the company through its transition. Do you have a moment? She asked, though her entry suggested she assumed an affirmative response. Of course, I replied, gesturing toward the sitting area by the windows, a deliberate departure from the imposing desk setup Daniel had preferred for meetings. Patricia settled into an armchair, studying me with her characteristic directness. The transformation of this company over the past 6 months has exceeded even my optimistic projections. Thank you, I acknowledged. The team has embraced the new structure remarkably well. Including Daniel, she observed. I'll admit I had doubts about his ability to function effectively in a distributed leadership model. I nodded, acknowledging the validity of her concern. Daniel's talents are genuine. They were simply overshadowed by his need for absolute control, dynamic that ultimately served no one well, including himself. And personally? Patricia asked, her tone softening slightly. How are you navigating that aspect? The question was unusually direct, even for Patricia. I considered my response carefully. Compartmentalization remains essential, I admitted. There are moments when professional interaction requires me to set aside the personal betrayal. But the clearly defined boundaries of our new relationship actually make that easier than the previous blurring of roles. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. Aurora would be proud of how you've handled this transition. The personal dignity, the professional vision, the refusal to be diminished. The mention of my grandmother, whose portrait now hung in the company's main lobby, brought unexpected emotion. I hope so, I said simply. I know so, Patricia replied with uncharacteristic certainty. She faced similar challenges in her time, though in different forms. The fundamental dynamic hasn't changed much. women expected to contribute without corresponding recognition or authority. Until they refused to accept those terms any longer, I completed the thought. Precisely, Patricia agreed, rising to leave. The quarterly numbers are impressive, by the way. The board will be pleased tomorrow. As she departed, I turned toward the windows, gazing out at the city skyline. The buildings reflected late afternoon sunlight, glass and steel transforming ordinary materials into something that appeared both solid and luminous. A fitting metaphor, I thought, for what the past 6 months had revealed. Not just about Aurora properties, but about myself. The strength that had always existed, now visible to everyone. The clarity that came from removing distorting influences. The capacity to rebuild something better from familiar elements. The text notification sound interrupted my reflection. Lillian had arrived in the lobby. I gathered my things, preparing to shift from corporate leader to mother, another transition that had become increasingly natural as both roles found their proper proportion in my reconfigured life. The winter. Gala for the Aurora Foundation sparkled with success. The grand ballroom of the Heritage Hotel transformed by subtle lighting and elegant floral arrangements into a space that felt both impressive and intimate. As founder and chair of the foundation board, I had the honor of delivering the opening remarks, welcoming the assembled guests who represented the city's business and philanthropic elite. 1 year ago, I could not have imagined standing before you in this capacity, I began, scanning the attentive faces. Not because I lacked vision or ambition, but because I had accepted limitations that were neither necessary nor beneficial. From my vantage point at the podium, I could see familiar figures throughout the crowd. My parents seated at a front table, pride evident in their expressions. Tony and Anna at a side table, their relationship now comfortable enough for public events. Patricia Donovan with fellow board members, representing Aurora Properties' institutional support for the foundation, and at a table near the back, Daniel with his new girlfriend, a real estate attorney he'd met through professional channels 3 months earlier. Her presence might have seemed awkward to observers unfamiliar with our evolved relationship, but the invitation had been genuine on my part and accepted with appropriate consideration on his. The Aurora Foundation exists to ensure that talented women in commercial real estate receive the mentorship, resources, and recognition their contributions deserve, I continued. Not as a matter of charity or political correctness, but because our industry is objectively stronger when diverse perspectives shape development decisions. As I outlined the foundation's accomplishments in its first 6 months, mentorship programs established, educational scholarships awarded, networking, initiatives launched, I felt a profound sense of alignment between personal experience and professional purpose. My own journey from diminishment to recognition had created both the impetus and the blueprint for helping others navigate similar paths. I'd like to recognize Emilia Martinez, our foundation director, whose organizational brilliance and relationship management skills have transformed vision into concrete programs with remarkable efficiency. Emilia rose briefly from her seat at the staff table, accepting the applause with professional dignity. Our working relationship had evolved into something neither of us could have anticipated during that confrontational family dinner a year earlier. Not friendship exactly, but a productive alliance built on mutual respect and shared commitment to the foundation's mission. And finally, I want to acknowledge the continued support of Aurora Properties, including from my co-executive Daniel Harrington, whose commitment to the foundation's work demonstrates that professional excellence and social responsibility can and should coexist. Daniel nodded slightly in acknowledgement, his expression reflecting the complex evolution of our relationship. Former spouses who had found a workable professional partnership after the painful dissolution of their personal bond. As I concluded my remarks and moved into the audience to mingle with donors and participants, Lillian appeared at my side, elegant in the midnight blue dress we'd selected together for her first formal foundation event. That was perfect, Mom, she said, squeezing my arm gently. Not too long, not too self-congratulatory, just the right balance of accomplishment and aspiration. Her assessment made me smile. My daughter had developed a sophisticated understanding of public communication among her many emerging talents. Thank you for letting me be part of this, she added, her expression earnest. It means a lot to see what you've created. You've been part of it from the beginning, I reminded her. Your strength during the transition gave me freedom to focus on building something new. Across the room, I noticed Evan chatting comfortably with my father, his recent growth spurt making him nearly as tall as the man he increasingly resembled. At 15, he navigated the complex family dynamics with remarkable resilience, maintaining relationships with both parents while developing his own independent identity. Dad's watching you, Lillian observed, nodding subtly toward Daniel. That look he gets when he's finally seeing something clearly for the first time. I followed her gaze to find Daniel indeed observing me from across the room, his expression thoughtful rather than resentful or hostile. When our eyes met briefly, he raised his glass in a small gesture of acknowledgement before turning back to his companion. He's been seeing more clearly for some time now, I told Lillian. Sometimes clarity comes at significant cost. Worth it though, right? She asked, perceptive as always. I considered her question seriously, weighing the pain of betrayal and divorce against the liberation and growth that had followed. Yes, I decided. Absolutely worth it. Later that evening, long after the gala had concluded and the children had returned to their respective activities, Evan to a friend's house for a weekend gaming marathon, Lillian to complete college application essays, I stood alone on the terrace of my home, watching stars emerge in the winter sky. The house, once a symbol of my beautiful but confining marriage, had transformed alongside me. I'd redecorated selectively, maintaining elements I genuinely loved while replacing those that had been primarily Daniel's preferences. The master bedroom now featured my grandmother's antique vanity, a piece Daniel had relegated to storage as too old-fashioned. The living room showcased Lillian's photography alongside artwork I'd collected during recent travels. The kitchen had been completely renovated to reflect my preference for open, communal cooking spaces rather than the showpiece design Daniel had insisted upon, physical changes that reflected deeper transformations. My mother emerged from the house, carrying 2 steaming mugs. Thought you might like some tea, she said, joining me at the railing. Successful evening. I accepted the offered mug gratefully. Beyond expectations? The foundation secured enough funding for the next 2 years of programming. I wasn't referring only to the fundraising, she clarified. The woman who stood at that podium tonight was fully herself, powerful not despite her experiences, but because of them. Her assessment resonated with my own reflections. The journey wasn't one I would have chosen, I acknowledged, but the destination has proven worthwhile. That's the paradox, isn't it? My mother mused. Some prisons we only recognize after we've escaped them. We stood in companionable silence, sipping tea and watching the night deepen. From inside came the faint sounds of my father discussing literature with Lillian, their voices rising and falling in the familiar rhythm of friendly intellectual debate. When I found the hotel receipt, I said after a while, my first instinct was to preserve what I had, the marriage, the family structure, the professional partnership. It took time to realize I was fighting to maintain a cage with a better view. My mother nodded understanding. The most insidious constraints are those we mistake for protection. Or worse, I added, those we mistake for love. The sapphire earrings that had catalyzed the confrontation now rested in Lillian's jewelry box, a 16th birthday gift I'd given her with the story of their journey, transformed from symbols of betrayal to emblems of reclamation and renewal. What matters, my mother said simply, is that you found your way to freedom. Not just escape, I reflected, but genuine liberation, from diminishment, from erasure, from the subtle daily compromises that had gradually narrowed my existence. Freedom that had enabled not just personal healing, but the creation of something meaningful, a foundation that would help other women navigate paths to their own professional recognition and personal empowerment. The cage door was open, and I had finally flown through. Before we end this journey together, I want to speak directly to you, yes, you, who has listened to my story from that shocking family dinner to the freedom I finally claimed. Perhaps you found yourself nodding in recognition at certain moments. The subtle ways your contributions have been minimized, the gradual erosion of your confidence, the growing gap between who you are and who you've allowed yourself to become to maintain peace, to support someone else's ego, to preserve a relationship or professional situation that no longer serves your growth. I want you to know this. Recognition of your cage is the first step toward freedom. It took a diamond bracelet, or in my case, sapphire earrings, on another woman's ears to fully awaken me to what I had accepted for far too long. Your catalyst might be different. Less dramatic, perhaps. A passed-over promotion. A partner who consistently takes credit for your ideas. A relationship where your needs are perpetually secondary. Whatever form it takes, that moment of clarity is precious. Don't dismiss it as paranoia or overreaction. Trust your perception. When I installed those hidden cameras, I wasn't just gathering evidence of infidelity. I was reclaiming my right to know the truth, to make decisions based on reality, rather than carefully curated illusions. The most important surveillance, however, wasn't of Daniel. It was of myself. Watching my own reactions, noticing my instinct to minimize, to accommodate, to preserve a status quo that fundamentally devalued me. Recognizing patterns I had accepted as normal that were anything but. My transformation wasn't accomplished in a single dramatic confrontation, satisfying as that dinner scene might have been to witness. It unfolded in countless small moments of choosing differently, speaking up rather than staying silent, claiming credit rather than deflecting recognition, setting boundaries rather than maintaining artificial peace. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. Your worth is not determined by someone else's capacity to recognize it. Your contributions don't become less valuable when they're attributed to another. Your voice doesn't become less powerful when others try to silence it. But it is up to you to recognize that worth, document those contributions, and amplify that voice. First for yourself, and then for the world. The life awaiting you beyond, whatever cage you currently inhabit, whether in a relationship, a workplace, or simply your own limited self-perception, is worth the difficult journey to reach it. The door is already unlocked. It always was. You simply need to walk through. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.